Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became Li Xiaoyu's Last Hope? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. I read my comments and other such things on websites like this, so feel free to drop a comment about anything, even if it's mean. All feedback is appreciated. Chapter 1. The Defender. Li Xiaoyu was not supposed to be here. His eyes fluttered open before the swirling colors of the city night began to cascade into his eyes. He rubbed them quickly before he let his body adjust to the new feeling he had all around him. As his vision came to the limelight, he was now clearly not in the same place he was maybe only a few seconds ago. There was no lab, there was blood that oozed across the tiled floor. He was not here. That was a good thing, at least for now. He was in an alley of some sort, and as the stars above him lit a generous path in front of him, he was lying down on his back as something uncomfortable pressed into his lower back. He looked down to see his white hoodie with small purple markings across the entire frame was dirty and covered with various bits of leftover food grime and blood. His head started to split, as if he had been struck by an anvil only a few moments previous, as he held his fingerless gloved hand to his head to try and ease some of the pain. He gritted his teeth at memories of his fight before he snapped back into his mind. His power was shielding him from a bright light, and now, I'm here. Clearly not back in San Francisco. He rolled his eyes at his own comment before he placed his arms down to stand up. He realized only then that he was lying on black garbage bags from the trash cans he had just crashed into. The smell finally hit his nose, and he used that as more reason to stand up and get out of this area. He stood up as he dusted and scraped off some of the grime and trash on his black and gray athletic pants. He analyzed his condition before anything else, poking and prodding himself with his hands to feel for any pain. Nothing that was downright odd. He could remember the fight, at least enough of it. He could remember being hit, pain and searing agony that escaped from his body, as well as his own blood soaking into the clothes on his back. There was still blood on his hoodie. It stained the bottom and part of his right side in a small stain that looked too small to be the pain he remembered. He looked down at his purple-colored sneakers with white midsoles and black outsoles to see no real sign of a scuffle like before. What happened? 1 minute I'm fighting him and then the next, he was here, wherever here was. He looked through the alleyway, which ended on his right side in a small side building, and to his left was the entrance, which trailed off into the more prominent side of the city he was in. The sounds that rang in his ear were familiar. Cars honking and the sound of civilians walking and chatting amongst each other meant that he was most likely still in his own world. He couldn't be sure, though. If I'm still back somewhere in the States, I can get back and reconvene within a few days. He placed a hand into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a small black leather wallet as he pulled out several $100 bills, checking to see how much he had. It will have to be enough. He could still be back in the lab. I'm going to have to see whether or not the distance is too far. He placed the bills back into the hoodie pocket before tapping around his left and right pockets, making sure he had his stuff on him. His right pocket had his phone good. He breathed a small sigh of relief as he knew that at least he had that on him. However, he was missing his pistol that would typically snap on a small holster on his left side, near the pocket. In his left pocket he felt his earbuds locked tightly in the small case, another sigh of relief escaping from his mouth. No gun. Could be worse. Zhao took out his phone from his right pocket and tapped it as the screen flashed on. He was still working and the battery was fine, much better than he assumed. At the top of his screen, the time said 7:53 p.m. It had only been maybe a minute since the battle. Still better than he assumed, so he kept his morale high. He tapped the map icon on his phone, trying to find out where he was. Elsewhere the world would be bad, but not as problematic. He could be searching for me right now. He didn't have a lot of time. Every day he wasn't fighting him meant others were dying. That he couldn't stand. He tapped on the option for his current location as it read in bold, Mizudafu, Japan. Zhao thought for a moment before. That's not a real city. Being from China himself, he understood a lot more about the areas and cities from the continent of Asia, which was to say this was not a real place. His mind felt like it got shattered before he began trying to piece together where in the hell he was. His eyes began to wander around his phone screen before he slid it down from the top as it, 7:54 p.m., April 1st, 20XX. 20XX? His breath hitched, just for a moment, before he brought his left hand to the bridge of his nose in frustration. He wanted to shout now, but he kept that anger under control. He placed his phone in his pocket before he paced to his left, walking towards the busy city street. He exited out from the alleyway into a beautiful city landscape. Billboards, neon, and large TV screens blinded him in stunning brilliance as he stumbled onto the crosswalk. He pushed past people, at least he assumed, before looking up towards one of the larger screens that sat upon a tall skyscraper. It cycled through images, more moving images of people in costumes. One man was entirely covered in wood, which was noted as Kamui Woods. It detailed a recent heist he had stopped near one of the city's major banks. A video appeared as his limbs stretched out like wood and captured the almost comical-looking burglars standing out of the bank. Another costumed person showed up on the screen, a man with large construction wrist guards, a muscular frame, and a blue shirt that was split down the middle that exposed his knuckles. This man, known as Death Arms, has recently helped move and rescue a few people from an old building that had collapsed. The video showed him moving and lifting a large block of stone clearly too big for any normal person to lift. Lee's eyes widened at both displays of power as he held out his own hand as ambient wisps of energy trickled out of his hand like raindrops. He closed his hand as he let himself calm down before putting his hand over his mouth in thought. What kind of version of Earth is this? No version of my Earth had anyone who could lift stones that big and make wood from their own arms. Lee looked about his own surroundings as he began to notice the people were hardly normal, even in comparison to the costumed heroes on the screens. People of all shapes and sizes walked about the street. Some had hair that went down to the ground, and some of them had fingernails that looked more like knives. One man seemed to have eyes as black as midnight, and smoke seemed to billow out from his eyes. Nobody looked the same, everybody had something different about them, whether you could see it or not, Lee did not know. What kind of Earth has people all around wielding superpowers? That was the only way he could describe such phenomena. He simply rubbed his hand over his face as he sighed in defeat and closed his eyes in thought. I'm clearly not in Delta Earth anymore. This would make this Epsilon. He opened his eyes as he was now getting small looks around him. He must have been standing there too long. He quickly pulled out his phone as he noticed on the same map that was telling him his current location was also notifying him about a blinking icon nearby. Just like previously, he was at least brought close enough to the target so that he could walk or take a cab of some kind. But he wasn't supposed to be here now. I was still fighting him. This wasn't supposed to happen until... He recalled the blood on the floor, the lifeless eyes staring at him. He shook that pain away before he simply looked towards the glowing dot on his phone. He had still failed, that was a fact, and right now, he had a job to do. Lee simply pulled out his earbuds as he almost jammed both of them into his ears before the music began playing. The simple beats and smooth techno kept his nerves from getting worse before he leaped out of the street. He didn't care about whether he was being seen right now, that could wait. He checked the glowing mark on his phone, it was still a way away, and it would be easier to start doing something now than later. His body leaped and bounded from building to building in self-contained jumps as the music rocked in his ears. This new world was confusing. He needed to find his new source before trying to understand anything more. He continues to leap as the stars dance across the sky. Let's hope that this place will have some strong people. He clenched his fist before he continued to go towards his new source. 8:43 p.m. Lee leaped across the final building as he looked back towards his phone before the glowing dot that guided him ended at the next building across. He landed on an adjacent building, which was a set of apartment buildings all designed the same. He noted down on his phone that the dot was moving around in one of the apartments down below. He noted the windows with the lights still on in the apartment he needed to be in, so he simply focused and jumped down towards the lighted window. There was no balcony where the window was placed, so he simply waved his hand as a spiral of purple energy appeared near the window. Then, in an instant, It formed into a purple platform of swirling patterns and block-like energy as he landed upon it. No sound came from the landing, and he simply stood on it as he looked through the window within. There, two people were having dinner, most likely mother and son, based on how similar they both looked. The mother was short, a little on the heavier side, with green flowing hair that went to her shoulders but was still tied with a bun in the back. She served her son an extra bowl of rice before Lee noted the son. The moment he looked upon the target, he knew. He could feel a sudden jolt rocket inside of his spine, the same feeling all the others had, and judging from the boy's reaction, he had felt that too. The boy was interesting to say the least. He wasn't the most interesting thing Lee saw on his run here, but nothing else really fits the description. He was on the smaller side, maybe only 5 feet 6 inches, with a large mess of dark green hair and pale skin. His face was dotted with small freckles, and his eyes showed a deep emerald color, a lot lighter green than his hair. The boy seemed to be nervous about something as he looked around the apartment, unaware of Lee's presence. He rubbed his back until his mother seemed to jitter with a look of worry. He flailed his arms, as if he was just trying to calm her down before they both returned to their dinner. He felt that too. He must be the one. I'll know when I touch him, but if he was reacting like I did too, there's no mistaking it. There he continued to watch the two after dinner was finished, and the mother had finished clearing and cleaning off the dishes before she retired for the night. The boy seemed to wish her good night as he headed into the hall nearby and seemed to have done the same. Lee knew that this was going to be the best time to test the theory about the feeling. He placed his hand on the wall before he soaked more energy into the wall right below the window. The wall spot glowed a soft purple before the space he desired opened up and a segment of the wall was missing. He softly entered the home as the energy came back and the missing wall chunk was returned to the wall. He made no noise as he entered, the benefit of assassin training as he looked at the home. It was modest enough, the perfect place for a family of 2 or 3. He walked around, observing and trying to place any information he might be able to gather in his new world. He saw pictures of the family, one where the boy was young and another where he was wearing a traditional Japanese Gakuren uniform with its simple black jacket style with the inlaid gold buttons giving it a sharper look. He looked to see that the picture was more recent than the other small frames hung up on the wall. He can't be more than 14. Why is this new source so young? He questioned before he simply made his way through the hall until he stopped at a door with a red, blue and golden name tag that read, Izuku. Must be the boy, Izuku. It sounded about as much as he looked, which was as much a compliment as it was a small insult. The door was shut as Lee placed his ear to the door to hear small breaths of sleep. He opened the door to see that the boy had fallen asleep at his desk, a mechanical pencil in his hand, as he was writing something in his notebook. Lee walked across as he observed the notebook writing. It was a drawing, a rather decent one at that, of the same Kamui Woods he had seen on the TV. However, it was filled with notes about his strengths, weaknesses, design ideas, and even a small chunk of information about how you would beat him. Lee looked as if about 12 other notebooks were lined perfectly on the desk with a laptop that was open to a small forum talking about the latest heroes. Lee picked up one of the notebooks as the entire thing was filled with information about these heroes. One thing stuck in his mind with each of these heroes. Each one was described with their power with the word quirk. No matter what power each one of them had, it was said to be their quirk. Quirks are superpowers, huh? But there are so many heroes. How many people have these powers? He thought back to watching and observing all the different types of people he saw on his trip here. He looked back at the other notebooks as he mentally sighed before placing it back. He then noticed, in the corner of his eye, a single action figure on his desk. It was of a man wearing red and blue, with great golden hair and 2 distinct tufts of hair that stand up. It was only then that Lee noticed how much of this man stained the room. In the dark room he didn't notice how many posters, figures, and all sorts of assorted merchandise were littered across the room. A chibi version of Lee with question marks around his head seemed to just stare back at the sleeping boy. This kid. He makes the word otaku feel like it isn't good enough for him. Lee sighed as he noticed how one of the posters seemed to claim this hero as All Might. It also had Japan's #1 hero at the bottom. So, he is the strongest hero? At least here in Japan, at least he admires the strongest. He thought before looking back at Izuku. He stepped up to him as he held his hand out to touch his shoulder. Now let's see if you are worth my time, Izuku. Lee whispered before he touched his shoulder gently. In that moment, Lee could feel something beat into this boy's heart. It felt different than his own heartbeat, like something had just been sealed within the boy. He could feel the pressure of something new tingling in his fingertips as he closed his eyes and focused. In that moment of time, he could almost see the boy standing in the darkness of his vision. He stood before a fire blazing with green color as he held his hands to it for warmth. Lee felt the heat of the flame. It was much smaller than he assumed. The heat was there, viridian and abundant, but its strength was weak. The boy stood before the fire before he turned back towards him, his eyes shining with a wetness from his tears as he was trying to smile through it. His spark is weaker than the others I've seen, but he is the one. Lee opened his eyes as he felt his presence shunt from space, and he removed his hand from the boy. He looked towards him. Tears were staining his face, getting on his notebook. Lee moved the notebook away from the boy, trying to keep the tears from damaging his hard work, and backed away from Izuku. Still, his flame being this weak isn't good. Is it because he's young? Why the hell would the next source be so young? Isn't the whole point of this? He cut his thinking short. It would get him nowhere to start questioning these things now, especially since he hadn't even spoken to the boy yet. The spark could wait. He needed to make sure that whatever he was going to do next would be more calculated, more about the task at hand. He had it within him. That was good enough for now. He simply walked to the wall of the room and used his ambient energy to open a space for him to walk through as the wall was placed back. He summoned a platform of energy before he leaped off towards the street as he landed with some force on the ground. He looked back to the apartment building as he decided that right now, he needed information and speed. He opened his phone and decided that he needed to understand his own surroundings first. He searched for a local place where he could have some internet access, only to find the only place that was open at this time was a local net cafe. He thought about it for only a moment before his mind began to wander about the place. If it's a cafe, they might have. His eyes widened a bit before he began to make his way towards the cafe. It had been a while since his last boba break. The next day, Izuku Midoriya didn't want to cry. He never really did, but at this very moment it was getting harder and harder. He was still wearing his middle school uniform as pinpricks of tears began to glisten in his eyes as he held his burnt hero notebook in his left hand. He kept the sniffles to a minimum as his body felt weak. The day wasn't even that bad at the start. He saw the debut of the new hero, MT Lady, as she stopped that giant supervillain in the morning. His mother said they were going to have Katsudon that night. It looked like a decent day. It was only when his teacher asked about everyone's career choices for high school that things went wrong. He could remember how they laughed and joked about his dream. They shunned him like they were so much better than he was. It only escalated when Bakugo, his only real friend he had known since they were kids, decided to join in. He may not have a quirk, but that didn't make his dreams feel less valuable. It was only after class when the same friend he knew destroyed his notebook and he kept that other thought out of his mind. There was no point dwelling on something he was never going to do. He could be beaten half to death, told that not even his own mother believed in him. He was never going to take the easy way out. It was only then that his notebook was tossed into the water for the koi fish in their school pond to eat and bite away at it. He was lucky he got down there so quickly. There were some burn marks and water damage, but it could be salvaged. As if that was the worst of it, on his walk home he had been attacked by a giant sludge monster. Caught in his maw, he thought he was going to die. He reminisced on that moment only some time ago as he flipped back to his notebook with All Might's signature on it from when he was saved. No, I don't honestly think you can become a hero without a quirk. His hero's words echoed back into the forefront of his mind, causing those pinpricks in his eyes to start waterfalling. He walked slowly down the street to get back to him as he tried wiping away his hurt, trying to find some comfort in himself. It was no use. Everything hurt in that moment, as if the world itself had turned its back on Izuku Midoriya, and perhaps it did. His mind wandered back to his dream. Izuku didn't often dream, at least. They never felt that way. It was either nightmares of some kind he didn't want to remember or just waking up the next morning. But this felt different. He was standing next to a burning flame. It was a beautiful emerald color, warm and almost glorious that it suffocated him. He was in darkness. No sound came through besides the crackling of the fire and the cold that blasted through his ears. The fire began to dwindle, as if the cold and the wind had banded together to destroy his light and warmth. He stood before the inferno as if to protect it with his life, so much so that he could feel its searing heat plastering his body. It hurt, but not like the pain from a cut or a punch, like the pain of knowing you were going to fail, the pain of knowing that no matter what you do, nothing changes. That hurt more than anything he felt even today. He only woke up as he looked behind him to see a man standing there. He watched him cuddle and hold close to the flame. His eyes shone a deep purple, an introspective look on his face. He seemed to be entranced by it too. But when he woke up, there was nothing. Just a stupid dream, Izuku thought to himself before staring back at the page with the signature. He looked back through the pages of heroes, wondering why he spent so much time chasing something he could never catch. It's not bad to have a dream, young man. Just make sure your dreams are attainable, realistic. All Might's voice still boomed in his head, despite the smaller form the hero had taken up. All that information, all that just to know that he himself was the one who couldn't do anything. Just a stupid dream, he repeated it back to himself before making his way closer to the train station. He had been dropped off quite a ways away from home, so he was going to have to take a train back if he wanted to. An explosion blew him out of his stupor as he looked towards a one-lane alleyway filled with stalls. People were gathered around the entrance on his side as he began to look towards it. Fire and smoke rose from the area, as he could hear people gasping and talking about what was happening. Izuku almost instinctually began to move towards the danger. However, he stopped. For the first time, he didn't want to go towards what was happening. What did it matter if he did? He would just watch anyway. He didn't have a quirk, and he wasn't strong or fast. He wasn't even the top scorer in his class. Kaken, he thought back to his old friend, still holding his notebook close to his chest. His feet didn't move from the spot as he was trying his best to look away from the danger in front of him. He clenched his fist around his pants to keep himself together, keeping that nervousness down below where he didn't want to see it anymore. He closed his eyes, trying to find something that would keep him away from here. The flame showed in his eyes, only for a second. The pain lingered from before. The man was seemingly watching him stand near the fire. What did it mean? Who was that man? He had never seen someone like that before. Why did it make him feel better? As if someone was watching him struggle and suffer through the pain, but there was no judgment. He was watching him fight and stand his own ground, but he did not judge. He did not worry whether he had something to give or offer, but he was just doing it. Those eyes, they shined differently than others. The kind that made him think that he was watching over him, protecting him. Before he knew it, another explosion rocketed through the street as Izuku se in a shaky breath and walked closer to the danger before him. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I don't have anything to offer, I would just be a bystander. He muttered to himself, the words reflecting his own thoughts, but his legs still moved closer. There, in the horrible smoky terrain of the alleyway, stood the sludge villain from before. His form contorted, and he moved around a new figure that he couldn't recognize from the angle where he stood before the crowd of people. It's him. What is he doing here? Didn't All Might capture him? His thoughts raced into all the possibilities before he knew the real answer. He covered his mouth with both of his hands, as if he was trying to keep the fear inside and hide his shaking legs. It was me. I distracted All Might. He escaped because of me. His eyes began to water from the realization as he leaned over, trying to keep his heart from pounding out of his chest. He recalled the moment he latched onto All Might, trying to get him to stay before he could answer his question. He recalled the rooftop conversation. He didn't even notice how he didn't have the bottles of the villain in his green trouser pockets. Izuku could hear the words from the civilians about how they worried about the heroes trying to save the person within. They commented about the whereabouts of All Might and why he wasn't there to help the heroes. Only Izuku knew the truth. His time was up. No way he could help that person now. He could try and stop the tears, knowing that whoever was caught in that monster, it was because of him. If only he knew that the same man was clutching onto a street sign as he clutched his horrible stomach wound, the thing that kept him from helping. He grunted in his small form, trying to do something to help. I'm pathetic, worthless. A disgrace. I'm not a real hero, I can't get in there to save one boy. The small All Might thought in his mind as his teeth gritted from the attempt to try to help. Izuku couldn't help but look towards the problems, as Backdraft, Death Arm and Kamui Woods couldn't do anything as the flames rose higher and the smoke denser. He couldn't help but force his eyes to look as if he saw the person who was captured by the sludge villain. He saw the spiky blonde hair of his childhood friend, his mouth covered in the sludge villain's body as his eyes looked towards the crowd in pain. Izuku saw it, and for just a moment he thought he was looking back at him, and only him, asking him, begging him. Help me. It wasn't even a thought anymore. It wasn't a decision to be made or a choice he had. It was pure, unbridled action that drove Izuku Midoriya to do the stupidest thing he could have ever done. His legs moved faster than they had before as he shoved his way through the crowd and burst onto the scene as the fire and smoke blew into his face. The eyes of the heroes, even All Might himself, looked stunned as Izuku was running towards the villain. His breath hitched in faded breaths. "Oh, idiot! Stop, you're going to get yourself killed." Death Arm screamed at the boy to try and stop this quirkless young man from getting himself killed. But it didn't stop him. Izuku just kept running. Why am I running? I can't stop. His thoughts rattled inside of his head before he wiped away the heat burning on his face, the same heat from the dream. He kept booking it down the street as the villain hadn't noticed him yet. Only then did the sludge creature notice the boy running at him, trying his best to save his friend. "Not this brat again. You're toast, kid." The sludge screamed out in anger as a hand-shaped line of sludge stretched out to attack him. Izuku's brain clicked, trying to find some way to help. His mind almost instantly went back to his hero notebook, the page on Kamui Woods that described using their weak spot to make them flinch and restrain them. He used the only thing he had, his yellow oversized backpack, and he flung it towards the sludge with all the strength he had. The stuff inside flung outside. Luckily, his All Might brand pencil case found its mark in the villain's eye as he flinched back and was forced to let Bakugo go from the pain. Bakugo breathed out heavily, getting as much air as he could before Izuku came running in to help. "Kaken!" he yelled while trying to fling and push away the sludge off of his old childhood friend. "What the hell? Why are you here, Deku?" Bakugo exploded the words out of his mouth as Izuku was trying to get him out. He didn't know why. There didn't really feel like an answer. The only thing he knew was that there wasn't really a choice to be made. He couldn't have just let him die. He couldn't watch him get hurt if he could do something. Even if it was small, even if it meant that he could get hurt. He had to do it. There was no other option. His mother's words, his classmates laughing at him, the doctor telling him he wouldn't have a quirk, and All Might telling him that he couldn't be a hero. Those words blasted into his mind, but those words had no effect on him. He smiled as best as he could, with tears staining his face as he looked towards his childhood friend. "Kaken, I couldn't just sit there and watch you die." It was those words that All Might needed to hear. He strained his body to the max as his muscle form began to build and build. "I have to do something, no matter the cost." His muscles began to build up as smoke arose from his body from the stress. That quirkless boy did something no one else could or was willing to do. The true sign of a hero. "Just a little bit longer, kid. And I'm done playing with you," the sludge villain announced before an arm-like tendril came slapping at Izuku. The other heroes tried to get closer, but as the arm came down, only one man stood strong as an explosion went around the boy. Izuku opened his eyes to see All Might in his pure muscle form as he blocked the tendril attack, his mouth leaking blood from the strain and bits of smoke on his body. Yet, he still smiled broadly towards the danger. "I really am pathetic. I told you the traits to make a great champion. And yet I wasn't living up to my own ideals," he said as he blew away the arm and left his fist back to prepare for his signature smash attack. "Pros are always risking their lives. That is the true test of a hero," he shouted as his fist began to push forward for his ultimate attack. Detroit smash. His fist knocked into the villain as his body was blown away as he grabbed hold of Bakugo, and the fire and smoke went away from the strength of his punch. The civilians would have been too, had it not been for the new hero lady protecting them from the wind in her giant form. All was silent before the cheers roared out in praise for All Might as he stood before the alleyway as the weather changed, and rain began to pour down from the sky. Izuku's body felt heavy as he fell onto the ground next to Baku. All Might looked down at the young man as his smile grew just a little bit wider. "It seems like you do have what it takes, kid," he said as if the cheers rang out. Unbeknownst to him, Zhao stood above one of the buildings as he sipped from his large plastic cup of taro-flavored boba milk tea, only about halfway through the enormous cup. He stopped drinking as he looked towards Izuku with an eyebrow raised. "You are quirkless with no power whatsoever. And yet," he thought to himself as he witnessed the boy running towards the danger. It was stupid, a horrible, terrible, idiotic plan that was never going to work, and yet it did. He noticed the man transforming, the one he looked up to. The same man who told him he couldn't be a hero on the rooftop transforms into the hero they worship now. It was only because of his bravery, only because of his wit, that the kid was alive now. Izuku may have caused it, but his actions spoke much more than what he had assumed previously. A young boy without a power, in a world full of the superpowered. It was a Herculean story if he had ever heard one, but he watched as the sky got darker in the sky, and the orange hue of the day began to cascade deeper into night. He noticed how All Might simply ignored the rest of the reporters that were bugging him with questions as he saw Izuku grab the stuff in his backpack and head off to what he assumed was his home. As Izuku had left the area, All Might seemed to move past the reporters to try and make it towards the boy before he rocketed away in a powerful jump. Lee watched as the young man held his backpack tight from the straps as he ran through the city to get back home. His spark is still weak. His body might be even weaker than that as well, but he noted at the boy's very spindly nature and much too thin frame. He took another sip from his cup before he smirked slightly towards the young man. "What a great story you have." Thus, the defender knew who he had to protect. Izuku Midoriya just wanted to have something to eat. It had been a much too long day of lows and very low lows. He recalled the words that the number one hero gave him before he sighed and held onto his backpack straps in sadness. He wanted to talk to All Might, at least tell him he was sorry for getting in his way, but he was surrounded by news reporters and media of all kinds. No way was he getting through all of that. He walked through his local neighborhood as the sky turned a beautiful apricot color as the sun went lower and lower on the horizon. He looked down on his classic red and white sneakers before he let out an audible sigh, and pulled out his phone to check to see if his mother had messaged him. She was a natural worrier, though he would like to say that it was because that was just how she was, rather than a product of his quirklessness. No message besides the one asking if he had gotten his lunch from her this morning. He slides it back into his pocket before looking forward to home. "I should have just said something before. I wanted to apologize. I just hope he understands. I can always try and send a message through his website when I get home." Part of him believed that he would never see that, maybe never remember how much trouble he caused him. "Deku!" Izuku turned around to see Bakugo running towards him from the street before. He still looked beat up from the villain attack, but there was fire in his eyes that he couldn't help but notice. "Kaken?" He had asked more to himself than Bakugo himself. Bakugo got close enough so that his regular speaking voice, still loud, could be heard before he stopped and took a breath from the sprint he took to get up to Izuku. His head lowered as both of his fists gripped in anger. "Listen, I would never ask for a weakling like you to help me. Don't think you look down on me. You got that? You're just a quirkless failure who won't even cut it as a rent-a-cop. You didn't help me. You did nothing." He shouted out as I echoed into the neighborhood. He turned around in anger before stomping off with his hands in his pockets before he shouted more towards the quirkless boy. "I don't owe you anything." He screamed out before he walked off towards a different street, and he could no longer be seen. Izuku's sweat dropped as his face contorted in confusion before his hands dropped from his backpack in confusion. What was that? He could hardly believe Bakugo would walk all the way over his way just to say that. Then again, maybe he didn't. He looked back at the street ahead with a sad smile before looking toward the clouds. He sighed in defeat as his hair covered his eyes in the shadows. Kaken is right though, it's not like I did anything to help today. He remembered back to the meeting with All Might, how the bottle drop was his fault, and began to walk forward towards home. Guess I should get back to giving up on my dreams. He thought solemnly before he took another step, and something slid in his path from the left pathway leading to a new neighborhood. I am here. All Might, in his much larger form, slid in front of Izuku as dust came from behind. He was still in his white t-shirt and green work pants as he stood up to readjust himself. All Might. How did you get here? How did you get away from all those reporters? Because I stand for justice. Not sound bites. He flexed his arms to show off who he truly was. Because I am all me, he tried to finish the sentence, but in a comedic puff of smoke he spewed out blood from his mouth and went back to Small Might. Izuku screamed out as he saw his hero shrink before his eyes once more. He was shaking violently from nervousness as All Might simply chuckled a bit. Sorry about that. Shouldn't have stayed in that form so long. He replied sheepishly, rubbing some of the blood off his mouth. Anyway, I have come to thank you, young man. As well as to discuss your question from earlier. Thank me? And no, I don't need to be thanked. I wasted your time, your energy, he said as his voice dropped into a low mumble. All Might didn't hesitate through this, though. No, if you hadn't told me about your life, if you hadn't run into the fight, I would have been a useless bystander in the crowd. Thank you for that. All Might's voice was low, as if he was trying his hardest not to scare the boy away, but firm that whatever he said about the fight wasn't true. Izuku looked towards him, a small smile spreading across his face. Even if he had caused the problem, that little bit of praise made some of the pain from before go away, even if only a little. That's not all though. You told me you didn't have power, yes? So, when I saw this timid, quirkless boy try and save a life, it inspired me to act too. The wind began to pick up, as if something was going to change soon. Izuku noted the tone of the hero's voice, not one of simple gratitude, but one of eternal longing. A voice that was trying to tell him something more than just thanks. Izuku looked towards his hero as he began speaking, and the sun shone directly above him, like the call of the earth itself. There are stories about every great hero, about how they became great. Most have one thing in common. He pointed at Izuku, as if he was telling him something he didn't know, as if he should understand it easily. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. Almost on their own. All Might thought back to him running towards the villain, everybody shouting and yelling at him, how he couldn't do anything, how he was going to get himself killed. And he did it anyway. Izuku could only hold onto his school uniform tightly, trying his absolute hardest not to let his emotions drown out the words of his hero. The words that he wanted to hear. His eyes glistened with sorrow as those feelings began to overpower him. All he could hear was his mother's words echoing back into his heart, which had pained his heart since that day. I'm sorry, Izuku, I wish things were different. She spoke as if she was at fault, as if it was all her fault. He couldn't handle it anymore. His legs began to give out, he bent over, and he could only see the blurry visions of the ground as tears fell from his eyes like shooting stars. He could only let loose small whimpers and sniffles as he couldn't handle the emotion. All Might smiled at him as if he knew the answer already. And today, that is what happened to you. Izuku didn't answer. He didn't want to have to admit that someone, anyone, could believe that he had it in him. That he could live his dream, and yet, someone did. You never told me, back then the thing I wanted you to say, the words I needed to hear. He thought to himself as he saw her crying face in his mind. He felt the wind rush past as he saw All Might stare down at the boy. And with all hissed he said, Young man, you too can be a hero. Izuku let it all go, every piece of his heart torn apart from all those years, laid waste to his greatest hero, his inspiration. He could hardly see from the tears streaming down his face and his clothes. He let out a small scream of pure emotional turmoil, letting those emotions out too. Bare so the rest of the world could see it. He could do it, his dream was there all along. Izuku can feel something within, the thing he was missing for so long. All Might smiled as he held out his hand as if to offer something to Izuku. I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. Izuku took a second before he looked up to his hero, with his face still stained with tears, and said, "Huh," as he tilted in confusion, and his eyes were white. All Might and Izuku both stared at each other as question marks surrounded the green-haired child. I inherit? What exactly am I inheriting? All Might smiled with a small chuckle. You heard what I said, young man. My quirk is yours to inherit if you so choose. All Might said as he lifted his hands up towards the sun as if to show how awesome his quirk truly was. But that's not possible. Why can't just pass on powers like that? If we could do that, it would be almost like training someone to use your quirk preemptively. Thinking about how much would change with that, we would have so many people with so many powers running around with abilities that their bodies can't handle and mumble. Words floated around the two as Izuku began his word storm from his constant stream of thought to speech. All Might simply sighed and fly-swatted the words away that were getting on her nerves before he shouted back at the boy. Don't go nerding out on me. This seemed to snap Izuku out of his mumble storm as he looked back at the hero. Izuku's mind went a little haywire. The ability to inherit a quirk would mean that All Might himself was given his own quirk. All Might pointed down to the shaking boy as he cleared his throat. Listen well, young man. This is your choice. You don't have to accept, but you will be missing out on an awesome power. All Might had said as blood was spewed out of his mouth. I wouldn't want to miss out. But you can just give me your quirk? Izuku, he spouted as he wiped his tears with his uniform. That is the reality. I can give you my super awesome power, and my power will be transferred to you. That is but one facet of my secret abilities. All Might held out his hand as an almost rainbow-like glow came from his palm, though whether that was real or not was up for debate. Izuku almost cried as he saw the power All Might held. The true name of my power is One for All. All Might said as the wind blew the tufts of his hair around. Izuku gulped down as his hands were now jittering from pressure as the name of his quirk was revealed. One for All, Izuku repeated, as if the name itself gave him some kind of supernatural strength. Correct. One person improves the power, then hands it off to another person. It continues to grow as it passes along. It is this cultivated power that allows me to save those who need a hero, the truth behind my strength. All Might clenched his hand hard before holding it out like a fist bump towards Izuku. Izuku couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was as if this sacred destiny was designed for All Might. The ultimate power was made only possible by sacred wielders who did everything to keep it out of evil's hands. It sounded like it came straight out of the manga he enjoyed. Then why was he giving it to him? That question racked his brain so hard it almost made him rethink whether he should just accept this sort of power. What would happen to All Might after he takes it from him? Would he not be able to be the people's number one? What if someone took it from him? Was that even possible? If he could have passed it to anyone, why not someone with a quirk or who was taller or stronger or... Kid, I think you're overthinking this inheriting thing again. All Might said as if his head hung comedically low. Yeah. Did One for All allow you to read my thoughts? No, kid. You were speaking that entire time. All Might said as if he had a blank stare on his face. Izuku blushed a deep red as he put his head in his hands. Sorry. His face felt like it was on fire. I'm choosing you because I was on a long hunt to find someone worthy to inherit One for All. It was only when I saw you run out to save that boy while everyone else sat idly by that I knew. He clenched his fist again, and a smile appeared on the skeleton of the man's bony face. You may just be a quirkless fanboy, but you tried to save that kid. You were the true hero then. Izuku bit his lip as the tears started to swell back again as All Might laughed at his second waterworks. Nothing wrong with a good cry now and then, kid, but you're going to have to try and close up those tear ducts if you want to inherit my power. He said, keeping the mood light so as not to make fun of the boy and his need to cry. Izuku wiped away the tears quickly as he held his arm up to wipe them away. This is it. He has done so much to encourage me, I can't not accept. All Might has given me a chance to become a real hero. Of course I'll take it. Hope rushed through his veins as he stood up after wiping the tears and looked at his hero. Of course I'll do it. Yes. Izuku said it as if it was the surest thing he had ever said in his entire life. All Might pushed his hand to his forehead with a smirk. No reluctance, huh? I figured that's how you respond. All Might said as he chuckled a bit. Both stood for a moment before. The two looked behind as a man stood behind All Might as he was making a weird sound. He stared at the two of them as All Might's eyes widened. I didn't even hear him get close. Did he hear about One for All? The man in question was leaning his back against the gate of someone's house as he stared at the two talking. He was drinking a large cup of boba milk tea as he was finishing the drink, and he made that awful slurping noise as the rest of the pearls at the bottom and the drink were gone. He held the empty drink cup as he looked at both of them. The man in question was decently tall, not as much as All Might, but a good few inches on Izuku. He wore a white hoodie with red drawstrings, and it had intricate lines that glimmered a mixture of purple and white, which made those lines shine like gemstones. He wore black athletic pants that carried the same purple glow as his hoodie and purple-colored sneakers with red laces, white midsoles, and black outsoles. His hair was jet black in a straight fringe haircut but a little messier at the ends, and he wore fingerless gloves that looked more like bracers than they did gloves. He swished the straw around as he walked closer to the pair. Might wanted badly to transform. He didn't look like complete bad news, but something in those purple eyes wasn't completely heroic either. But he knew that if he transformed, it wouldn't last long, and straining himself further would be troublesome. All three of them stood around before the man stopped swishing the straw around and placed his hand up in a greeting. "Yo," is all he said as both Izuku and All Might looked at him with blank stares. "Yo," they both questioned in their heads. "I wouldn't try fighting me right now. It doesn't look like you can keep your muscle form up any longer, especially after the fight with that sludge guy," the stranger said as he seemed to be looking for a place he could throw the cup away. He was there during the attack? And how does he know about All Might's time limit? Izuku questioned in his head as his legs seemed to shake a little in fear. The man simply sighed as he held up one hand before looking at them with some surprise. "I'm not here to fight. I promise." That calmed Izuku's nerves down a good bit, but All Might still looked like he was ready to fight at any moment. Even putting his hand in front of the boy, Izuku got embarrassed by the notion. "How do you know about my limit?" All Might said, the sternness in his voice not leaving, even after what the man had said. "It's easy when I overhear the conversation as well as see you transform in the crowd." All Might's mouth was wide open as lightning out of nowhere made him turn black and white in horror. You overheard us talking about that, but you weren't on the roof with us." Izuku shouted but realized he was speaking a little too loud and calmed down. "I was there, you just didn't see me. And I know about One for All too, in case that wasn't obvious enough. You guys really should have tried speaking somewhere not so open," he stated matter-of-factly. All Might fell onto the floor as if he were a statue knocked over, even taking on a stone-like appearance. "All Might?" Izuku shouted once more. The man sighed as he walked up closer, with both hands in the air to show he wasn't trying to do any harm. He stood before Izuku as All Might stood back up to be near the stranger. "Despite the circumstances, I also don't plan on saying anything about this either. Your secret is safe with me," he promised. All Might didn't seem to buy it, but what other choice did he have? "What do you want?" All Might questioned as his breath hitched for a second. The man simply pointed to Izuku as he was taken aback by the answer. "Me." He pointed at himself, wondering why him. "Yup, and I would love to explain it all, but it seems like we are still on the edge right now." "Can you blame me?" All Might asked. "Knowing about my timer is one thing, but One for All, that's a secret I would take to the grave." All Might commented firmly. "I agree. I would also like to keep this a secret from others as well, but it seems both of us have need of Izuku Midoriya over there." He pointed at the boy. All Might seemed to look over to the boy as he looked over to his dark green hair and simply scratched his head. "Right on the nose with the name, huh?" All Might commented quietly. "Yeah." Izuku responded to the quieter All Might. "I mean to say that I think we should all calm down and just talk this out. I have no intention of doing anything to you guys, nor do I really plan on doing anything with the information about you or One for All. The stranger said solemnly before putting a hand in his pocket. Izuku didn't know what to even respond with. This strange man just knew about the secret of one of the strongest quirks, and yet, why me? Why do you need me? He asked for more of a reassurance and to truly understand what the man was saying. I would like to explain that, but perhaps us being in an open neighborhood with people who could just walk by and overhear us wouldn't be great. The man said as he stared at All Might, still reeling from the stupidity of their location. A blue arrow with the word stupid flew into All Might as he simply sighed. Is there a place you have in mind? All Might replied with sadness echoing around him. I didn't think All Might could look so sad. Izuku shook a bit as he saw the state his hero was in. The man shifted a bit as he looked at the cup in his other hand and smiled a bit. I have a suggestion. It had only been 30 minutes, and Izuku Midoriya was already more surprised by any amount of information in that small span of time than he had been in the last 14 years of his life so far. After being told the secret of All Might's strength, after being told he could be a hero just like he wanted for most of his life, and after being told that he could inherit said power, he was now sitting inside of a small private room of his local net cafe, sipping on melon soda, next to All Might in his smaller form and the man who they had just met, who was drinking a large cup of brown sugar milk tea. This was the place he wanted us to talk? Izuku questioned in his mind before sipping a little on the glass of green soda. It had already been quite a long day, and now it was getting much longer than he intended. All Might sipped from his foam cup of pure black coffee before setting it down on the desk they were given where the computer sat and coughed loudly as if he was going to announce something. Is this really the best place we should be having a conversation? All Might deadpanned to the man as he continued to gulp down the drink. The man placed down the cup before he coughed. I just so happened to find this place with rooms relatively cheap. The drinks are great, and I didn't want to just do this in a space where someone could just hear us. Plus, they have great milk tea. He stated matter-of-factly. So, you just wanted to get some more milk tea? All Might asked in a small whisper. The man didn't say anything before grabbing the drink cup and slurping down more of the tapioca pearls at the bottom. Oh boy, All Might and Izuku thought to themselves. With that in mind, introductions are in order. Not that I don't know you two already. I've been trying to catch up since yesterday. He bowed low on the comfy, almost bed-like flooring of their private room before facing the two in a serious manner. I am Li Zhao, and he hesitated as if he was trying to still form the words in his mind before he said them out loud. He sighed before pulling out his phone and speaking his next words carefully. I am here to protect you, Izuku Midoriya. That made Izuku go into overdrive. His mind was still trying to process who this man was, even after he had already told them his name. Protect him? What did he mean by protect him? From what? Or rather, who had stuck more into his mind? Izuku was already shaking. Maybe it was the nervous little boy inside his heart that had been there since he was little that made him shake and quiver in some kind of fear that shouldn't be there, but he did. The man now known as Lee stared deeply into Izuku's eyes before he could tell that he may need to change his approach. He's shaking. You knew that the boy was a nervous wreck. From your watch over him during the day to his talk with All Might on the roof, it was clear that he was a bit of a jumbled, nervous wreck of a nerd. But this much? He thought quietly to himself, trying to understand how this boy could have ended up this meek. His interaction with the aforementioned Kakin told him a lot of things, but not that he was scared of talking to other people. He knew that their relationship must be quite complicated. The talk about jumping off of the roof of his school building meant that already it was quite bad, but this was different, much worse than he predicted. Like I said, I am here to protect you. To build you up into something much greater. You spoke before softening the expression on his face into less of a scowl. PP protect me? I don't ever think I needed something like that. You must be mistaken. Izuku had rebutted but was clearly still cowering from the look. All Might seem to notice as he looked towards you in a questioning glare. From what exactly? I say protecting, but really, he decided to leave that part of the conversation for now, There are more important things since he hasn't shown up yet. I'm here to help you. You've said all those things, but what are you truly? All Might spoke up, trying to budge the conversation into a direction where he had to reveal more things. Luckily, they hadn't picked up on his hesitation to speak more clearly before. Not from here. I am not from this world. This world? Izuku awkwardly asked. Correct. I know it may be hard to believe, but this world of quirks and powers is not my own home. I have come here via a form of transportation that is no longer accessible to me, and now I am here to help you, Izuku Midoriya. You want us to believe that you truthfully came from somewhere other than Earth? You're going to do better than just telling us your name and asking us for your trust. All Might replied. I don't expect you to believe it, I just ask that you understand that right now I have no other choice than to do what I am doing right now. I am not from this place, I cannot lie about that, and I am here to help him. He pointed back to Izuku, who was still paying full attention to his words. Then all you ask is for some trust? All Might asked, as if he was still astounded by what he was hearing. In a sense, yes. I come from an Earth different from this one, where a glowing star had granted powers beyond anyone the world had ever seen to those born into it. I like quirks. But if you're from that place, how did you get here? Izuku questioned, pulling out a small burnt notebook and writing down the information he had already heard. My purpose was to find certain individuals to protect and train them against strong threats. That is my goal as the defender. I came here after my last task went wrong. You said before sipping more of his milk tea. The word defender stuck in Izuku's mind. Flashes of mental images of knights in steel armor, heroes of might, and bulwarks that stopped incoming attacks on citizens. He watched as you stared back at him, a certain spark in his eyes lighting the path. Those eyes, deep purple and swirling, reminded him of his dream. He can remember the man standing away from him, those same eyes burning into the back of his head and staring back at the stoked flame. My dream, that was you, Izuku said, almost standing up in realization. You nodded slowly before placing his cup back on the table. It seems that you do remember. Good, that makes this easier. Young Midoriya, you had a dream with him in it? All Might said, his eyes widening. Why? I was standing before a green flame, and he was watching me stand before it. Izuku explained, still confused at the whole thing. That was the spark. You had begun to form something strong that night. It is the strength I have come here to help you with. I might have a quirk? Izuku said hesitantly, as if the answer would reshape everything he knew. Quirk, I do not know, but it is not nothing. I know about your quirklessness, Izuku Midoriya, and while that hasn't changed quite yet, there is more to you than you know. Something about him saying that made Izuku's heart leap out of his chest. His face blushed a candy apple red as a wobbly smile came out. Even All Might had to smile just a bit at the pure boy. You pulled out his phone before tapping on an icon on the top as he turned it around and handed it to the two. On the screen were Izuku's vitals. It showed his heart rate, both in graph and numbered form. It showed his current strongest emotion, which was now worry. It also showed a small bar of red, which was just at the letters HP on the side, as it showed some damage and fatigue from today, but it wasn't much lower than it being at full. Izuku's eyes bulged out of his head as his mouth hung open. Are you stalking me? No, whenever I've gone to a different world, I have been able to monitor and keep track of the health and status of my associates. He kept the phone out for him to see as All Might grabbed it to examine it. Other places? You've been elsewhere? All Might asked. Yes, I've met plenty others with sparks like you. They were all different, but the mission is the same every time. I must protect them. He placed his left hand over his heart, as if he was hurt by something. The mission? Is this some kind of job? In a way, yes. I was tasked to find and help strong people, to help grow and cultivate them into something even more powerful. The goal of my entire purpose is to make sure those with sparks can change the very foundation of their own world. He almost shouted but kept it a little quiet since they were in a public place still. It still sounds like you have some kind of reason for this. What is the other reason for all this? All Might asked. In reality, while that is my mission, I have my own personal reasons. We defenders have our memories taken from us to prioritize the mission so that we know only what we know to help fight the good fight. So you don't know anything about why yourself? Izuku hesitated before asking gently. No, but slowly I have been learning. With each time I do this, for every person I meet and meal I try, I'm starting to piece things together. But nothing has really changed, not much anyway. Izuku could almost hear the sadness in his voice, behind the seriousness he tried to convey. Perhaps, whether this mission was important, there was something else beyond why he tried to help. All Might could already tell that his main reason for doing this was to find out more about himself. You weren't a hero through action alone. Everyone had a real reason for doing and being the way they were. He could trust the man alone about those intentions, but he still felt off. How old are you, Lee-san? All Might replied after some time. I don't know. I don't age like everyone else and wasn't told either. I can't be more than high school age though, but in terms of a real number, I have no idea. How long have you been doing this? Izuku was asking the real question in his mind. You gripped his hands tight, restraining the anger in his mind. Flashes of dead people shined through everything else, and a man with diamond hair. Years, I'm not sure. I didn't care to count at first, but I can say at least more than however. This is the 5th world I've been to, Epsilon. Epsilon? That means there have been at least 5 others you've trained. Where are they? All Might asked before watching him intensely. The only look that you could make was an eyes closed, gritted teeth look as he breathed out slowly. His face was stained in anguish, completely overlooking how he felt and looked at the time. He just let some of those rolling feelings out in a single breath as he looked towards the two. All Might could already tell what the answer was, which was alarming. A look like that, covered in pain and a feeling he knew all too well, meant that whatever Lee was saying was at least somewhat correct. But it wasn't him being correct that worried him, but the answer to the question. Izuku, on the other hand, didn't care much about what the answer truly was. That look on Lee's face meant so much more. The hurt that carried him every day, clearly holding something in his heart. I was weak then, so weak. He let those tightly balled fists loose as he breathed out slowly. This is different, I know it is. How? All Might stated it almost as a fact rather than a question trying to be asked. It has to be. The determination that rocked the emotion in his voice was obvious. Maybe it wouldn't be. It could have been that the same thing would happen, you wouldn't know until it happened. Until he showed up. But he had to try something, regardless of what would happen. Something about this kid he looked like he couldn't do or be anything. But the moment he jumped into danger, whatever All Might saw in him, I see too. He stared intently at Izuku, the nervous wreck of a boy already shivering from this much attention on him, as you smiled just a bit towards the boy. I will protect you and show you how to be strong, Izuku Midoriya. You? He said with no hesitation. Izuku stared at him with wide eyes before nodding slowly, some of the nervous edge on him already fading away. What do you think, young Midoriya? Turning to the small boy who was finished with his drink. I don't know. He thought to himself, fiddling with his fingers. Lee didn't seem like he would do anything bad to him. A person like him, it seemed too far-fetched for him to do all this just to get closer to killing All Might or something similar, though that thought had already escaped his mind. His mind raced back to all those moments in his life, at the playground with Bakugo, his mother crying to him, even recently as he cried while being attacked by the sludge villain. He felt so helpless. And now, a man says he can be stronger, that he has some kind of power now that he didn't even know about. Was that his quirk? Was the doctor all that time ago wrong? He didn't know, and maybe he was still right, but he believed in him. It was so odd to him that this feeling came back. Maybe he was only being emotional so that he could be something more than a helpless boy trying to play heroes, but these two believed in him. The hero he longed to meet, a man who he barely knew, said he could do it. So he had to try. I'm going to believe him. Izuku, he stated with confidence. Young Midoriya. We barely know anything about him. Are you sure we should be betting on him so early? All Might questioned. I'm right here, you guys, you said softly, as if he had his feelings hurt. I know, but he believes in me, and I will do anything to prove him right. Izuku admitted. All Might gave the boy a sad smile, almost heartbroken, and this boy only needed someone to tell him something so simple to start having more confidence in himself. You just nodded as he sipped his drink. Lee-san, I hope that I can prove to you that I am the person you are looking for, he said with a bow. You rolled his eyes at the boy's gesture but felt that surge of hope spread through the room as well. He finished his drink as he placed it down, took his phone, and opened his contacts to show his number. Let's stay in contact, Izuku Midoriya. They both exchanged numbers as Izuku looked at his phone to show that he should have been home some time ago. He had even received a few messages from his mother asking where he was. Oh no. I should have been home sooner. I'll talk to you guys later, Izuku said as he grabbed his backpack before he ran to the door. He stopped right before the door as he looked over to All Might. Thank you, he said with another bow. Why are you saying that to me, young Midoriya? All Might said, pointing to himself. For believing in me, he said, before he zoomed away in a hurry. All Might couldn't believe what he was hearing. It almost made him feel like a hero once more. You just scoffed before looking back at the hero. Seems like we both have a new goal. It seems so, but I'm just going to let you know now. All Might looked back at you with deadly seriousness. Hurt him in any way, touch a hair on his head, or destroy his spirit, and I won't take very well to it. I don't want to have to regret letting you into this boy's future. All Might said with his deadly calm. Just say you care about him already, you said with a blank stare. All Might blushed hard before his jaw hung open. Oh, of course I care about the young man. I just want to make sure we are in agreement. Right? I'm surprised you haven't started packing his lunches already. Why you? All Might stuttered as the two sat within the room. It took a moment for All Might to calm down before he realized something. You say you are new to this world, so where are you staying right now? Oh, well, I was staying in this new cafe for now, but I have a plan to make sure I have the funds and shelter to help out Izuku Midoriya. His mind flashed to see a large casino in the main city district. I would ask, but it seems like you have everything under control. I would also be careful to learn how society works around here. Keep yourself well kept up. All Might said as he stood up to leave. I understand, the basics still apply from the places I've seen. They may not have had heroes, but powers, I assume, are still heavily restricted, am I right? You pondered. Correct, I assume you have some kind of power as well. I would be careful not to use it in public. All Might adjusted his shirt. I also assume you have some kind of training you have planned for Izuku Midoriya to receive your quirk. A power like yours cannot possibly be just giving it to him without some kind of special preparation. You predicted. Also correct. I shall share the details once I iron them all out over the next 2 days. All Might seem to realize something, as if a blue aura appeared around him. I forgot to tell young Midoriya to meet with me in 2 days. You sighed as he pulled out his phone and texted the details to Izuku. This was going to be much harder than he thought. 2 days later. Izuku really didn't want to believe that he was trying to pull a large refrigerator with the number 1 hero sitting on top of it in his muscle form. He was pulling them on with ropes, but he made no progress whatsoever as he slipped into the sand of Dagoba Beach below. He brushed off some of the sand on his All Might t-shirt that was a size too large for him, as he shook his head in frustration. He noted that Lee was standing nearby as a look of dread appeared on his face watching him pull the fridge. Hey, this fridge is pretty comfy, he remarked with a chuckle. How are you doing down there? You know most people move these without any super strength at all. All Might simply pulled out his phone as he looked towards the small boy below. Why yeah, but there's an extra 600 pounds on top of that too. He tried to reason with his mentor. Lee was already walking closer as he pulled out his hand to help him up. Izuku took his slowly before he was pulled up. He was now wearing a white t-shirt with some graphic design of MT Lady on it, as well as a pair of gray jean shorts. He didn't have anything else on him, but 2 bottles of water which he handed one to Izuku, who accepted without question. Nah, I've lost weight. I'm down to 560 these days. He stated as if that made a difference on Izuku's weaker body. You honestly think moving all this trash is going to be enough to train up his body, make him a proper vessel. He said with air quotes. Yup, 'cause right now, All Might snapped pictures of the boy as he was still covered in the sand. You're not ready for my power. Didn't you say I was worthy? His eyes flowed with comedic tears as they got all over Lee. He wiped them off with a grunt. No. I mean your body. One for all is a lot of physical power packed into one small quirk, and with the combined power of all of its previous users, it can be a lot on the body. An unprepared body couldn't handle it. A picture of Izuku's body showed up in his mind as all of his arms and legs were ripped off of him. Your arms and legs would shoot off if you tried. There's no way. Izuku shouted in a chibi version of himself watching the diagram. Makes enough sense. If All Might's power really is the combined force of everyone together, even if you just do all this, there's no guarantee it won't cause at least some damage. You put his finger to his head as he thought. Which means this is just one big gym workout, and you are my trainer. He looked to All Might sympathetically. Correct. By doing all this not only would be building up the muscle to use one for all, but it will do the city a huge favor. Cleaning up is one of the main jobs of a hero. He posed dramatically as the morning sunrise beamed on him. He then did a quick spin as he pulled out a set of papers. This here will be the guide you need to follow to be ready by the time the UA entrance exam is upon us. He said as he handed the papers to Izuku. But at the school? You question quickly. Why yes, young Lee. The best hero school in all of Japan, where the greatest heroes go to become great. Udata High School. With its exam in only 10 months, we have a lot to work with before we can get young Midoriya all the way to the top of his physical ability. All Might said as Izuku was reading over the schedule. You wondered something as he looked over the schedule. All Might have the young boy. Everything, including his sleep, was documented, as well as meals, homework, and rest time being factored into the equation. He looked over at the time frame of the test, February 26th. That was only about 10 months of pure workout before the exam. He looked around to the absolute dump heap that was the beach before looking back at the spindly boy in front of him. Will he be able to do what you do after this is all set and done? We would still need to work on pure fighting ability, but if he had your kind of power, that might be a bit reductive. He said before reading over the plan more. We'll know. We won't know for sure how much his body can handle until it is time for him to get the power. I know for sure that even then it might be difficult. If he uses too much of one for all, he could still end up heavily damaging himself. All Might clarified to Lee. So let's say that this Udata exam has him fighting people or taking care of some minor threats. Along with having to have some kind of real control over one for all, he is going to need some actual combat skill. He held out his hand to Izuku, as if asking him to let him see the paper. Izuku handed the stack to him as you looked over it once more and flung it out. Which this provides none of. You simply handed the paper back to Izuku as he seemed to cross his arms. What do you suggest then? Izuku pondered as more of a question, rather than retort, on making his mentor look dumb. If one for all is just about pure physical ability to wield it, we are going to work much harder on allowing you to actually use it with some real ability rather than one and done. I suggest upping the amount of work. You said as he looked towards the paper. Whoa, hold on now. If you are going to just casually increase the intensity of the work, then it will just end up being bad for him in the long run. I made that plan specially designed around his body and what he can handle. All Might started as he got off the fridge. How does All Might know all that about me, scary? As Izuku shivered as he imagined All Might watching him in a bush with binoculars as he walked to school. I agree with you, but it's about getting him ready for Udata itself. If it really is the best hero school, there is no way any what is doing right now is going to be easy. However, giving us the best way to increase his likelihood of getting in is my priority. Izuku. You asked at the end of his sentence. Why yes? Izuku stuttered nervously. Do you think Udata is the right path? Is that your end goal? Oh, of course. The greatest heroes went to you. Even All Might went there. All Might felt a surge of pride from those words. It's a long shot, but if I'm going to be a hero, then that's where I would want to go. His determination filling the small, clean area of the beach. Then you know that won't be easy. For someone without a quirk, let alone the physical capability to let you do that, then you're going to work much harder than everyone else. Izuku felt hurt by hearing those words, a constant reminder of how much more he had to do, just to even have a chance of getting in. However, that only made his want for it even more. For the first time, you saw Izuku stand up a little straighter and look to him with a fiery passion the boy seemed to lack. Of course. I will do anything to get into U.A. His voice boomed across the sunlit horizon. You sighed a bit as he eyed to All Might to show him. I understand the need for improving his training regimen, but I'm not quite sure I can. I made this plan with the help of a well-versed doctor. I'm just not sure how far we can push his body. He thought back to when he had asked the U.A. school nurse to be able to apply this workout for him. It's just about understanding how much he can apply. Small applicable changes are required for this to work. I don't doubt the legitimacy of whoever you asked, but clearly the situation is different than just a healthy full-body workout. We are going to have to build his muscle, endurance, and overall combat ability within less than 10 months, ideally less than 8, so I can help him with anything practical. Wait, what exactly is it that you do? Izuku asked with bashful innocence. You waited a moment as he thought about his next choice of words, but decided that it meant not much since he would have to tell them anyway. I am a trained assassin by trade. I have honed my physical and mental abilities to an absolute. I have experience in pushing people past their limits. He stated. The atmosphere has changed instantly as Izuku gripped his hands in fear. He looked into Yu's eyes, trying to understand what he meant, but the truth was written all over his face. His eyes lacked that of the innocence of a child, or a man built upon the morals of his own world. He sorely lacked that spirit he saw within his eyes. They were unjudging, unquestioning, and unrelenting. That scared him, as if the mental images of seeing Lee covered in blood dominated his vision. He couldn't have done it on purpose, could he? Was he going to do it now that they had some built-up trust? All Might was the first to speak as his eyes seemed to glow in anger. And when was this going to be told to us? Liquid power echoing off his voice before you sighed in contempt. I had planned it. I just needed some leeway first so that you could understand my circumstances. You must understand that this is simply what I was tasked to do. Protecting people means many things, and some are too adamant about spilling blood. You said his voice became unreasonably cold. Despite that, you ask us to trust you knowing that you could have killed however many. All Might seem to hesitate before answering the final part of his question. I don't expect you to do anything but understand that my circumstances required me to do things that I had no choice in the matter. I've been to 4 other places, where their world structure, society, and even morality was all different from each other. I had my memories taken from me and told that I had to protect people no matter the cost. It was inevitable that blood was spilled. Still, those people had their lives taken? Did you even feel anything after? Izuku asked, trying to find some hope in Lee. He paused for a moment as he seemed to cycle through his own experiences. He gripped his hand tightly as he saw the people he was trying to protect dying in front of him. He breathed out before looking to Izuku with small tinges of hope. I don't understand exactly how I felt, not at the time. I understand that even now, the choices I make weigh heavily upon my conscience. I just need you to understand that I had no choice. Izuku saw that flash of hope somewhere deep in his mind. He was thinking about his actions, trying to piece together something stronger meant that he was careful, and more importantly looking towards himself with introspection. That was always the first step towards change. All Might closed his fists. The fact that he was even having this conversation with someone else could be seen as hypocritical. He saw the man he once hated, the one that killed his former master, dead bleeding on the floor as he stood above him. He figured that he was dead, that he had finished the job. Killing was never the first option, but when it was the only option, he understood that more than he wanted to admit. Still youngly, I need you to tell me whether that past has been left behind when you got here. All Might questioned to the young man. You didn't say much besides bowing to him slowly. As long as you guys believe in me, I shall leave that part of me behind. At least until something forces my hand. he said, sincerity dripping from his tone. Izuku sighed before he put his hand out to Lee. Then I guess I'll be in your care, Lee-sen. He smiled with a shy grin as his hand was still outstretched for him to shake. You simply shook the hand quickly before he nodded to him slowly. I'm going to protect you, help you get strong. I need you to believe that. His voice is becoming softer. I suppose I shall leave that in your care too. Izuku rubbed the back of his head nervously. All Might seemed to sigh as he placed his head in his left hand. You are way too trusting, young Midoriya. Though I guess that is quite an admirable trait. Still, All Might eyed up the young man before walking closer to inspect the two. I will be watching you, young Lee. Even now more than ever it has become quite apparent that we will have to walk this future with you. Let's do our best to keep our promises. Any mention or show of trying to hurt young Midoriya or betray our good faith, it won't end well. All Might remarked. Yes, I know. Is your name All Might or is just like a hero code or something? You left all the tension away as All Might's sweat dropped before he coughed. Whenever we are in public, try and refer me more so as Toshinori Yagi. You can as well, young Midoriya. All Might said as he dropped his muscular form in a puff of smoke. Izuku seemed to be nervous of this as he flinched. All right, Toshinori. You'll get used to it. All Might said as he looked at Izuku, whose face was flushed with a deep red. Is it okay if I can still call you All Might in private? He seemed to be shaking as he asked the question, as if he had said something wrong, he would have been hit. All Might smiled as he slapped the young boy on the back. Of course you can, young Midoriya. He laughed a hearty laugh as you sighed and held up the papers examining them once more. I suspect we are going to have to up some of this training, perhaps full training days and more rest PRDS in between to help with the intensity. With super hard workouts, it can be more beneficial for 2-day rest PRDS, since you get more out of the days you are working out. You seem to be already trying to fix the schedule. But I still have to keep my grades up, otherwise I won't even try and accept me for the exam. I don't to be slacking on that either. Izuku said as he rubbed his arm nervously. We're also going to have fixed this nervousness you have. You said as he simply poked Izuku on the shoulder and the boy flinched. I just get nervous easily. Izuku stammered, his face a light pink from embarrassment. Right. You rolled his eyes to the comment. What do you suggest we do about the training, young Lee? I don't mind putting in some more effort here and there, but I still have hero work and some other business I must take care of. All Might said, clearly withholding some information. You ignored it for now as he seemed to put the papers down. I believe the best course of action right now is start on the beach cleanup process. It will help build up your muscles in all their groups. I think then, you will come to my place and we shall work on your endurance, durability and overall combatability. So, just using you as a way of building up ways for me to fight? Izuku asked. Yes, but more so that I can also help you building up your spark. It's not going to be easy, in fact I would say this is going to SCK bad. You will have get up after everything, push yourself harder than you ever have before, but there is one thing I can promise. You seemed to push his finger into the boy's chest as he flinched. You will come out of these more than 20 times stronger than you are now, Izuku Midoriya. That number made Izuku almost feel like he was given some kind of special right to take this opportunity. His heart beat loudly in his chest before he stared up at you and shouted to him with determination. Yes. 2 days later. Inko Midoriya is always worried about her son. She was a natural worrier to boot, but even more so that he always seemed to get himself in trouble or always set himself to higher and higher prospects. She didn't hate that part about her son, she loved him more than anything, and his ability to push himself harder and harder was admirable. She wondered why no one else saw those traits within her boy and not. She didn't want to think about that time anymore, it was hard enough on him already, and if she started tearing up because of her own mistakes, she would and couldn't forgive herself. So the least she could do was make his favorite foods, praise him where she could, believe in him. But she didn't want to admit how hard that could be. She wanted him to be safe, to have a good life where he could be happy about the things he could do, the version of himself where he didn't make her worry. She thought that maybe that would never happen, but the least she could do was try and believe in him. So, when he told her that he was training to get to the U, she was stunned to say the least. He had told her that he was going to be working out before and after school, even asking her if he could ask her to change their usual meal plan to better suit his body as he trained. So of course, Mama Midoriya said yes. It had only been about 2 days since Izuku had asked all this. She was preparing a small breakfast for him a little too early, but she was used to getting up early to prepare his lunch as well breakfast and getting started on housework. She heard him rustle his bedroom door open as she finished setting aside the side dishes for their meal. She washed her hands quickly before placing down the rest of the food as he walked into the room. He had been beaten half to death, at least in her eyes. His face still had bags under them from lack of sleep. He had small notable marks on his fists and arms that looked more like bruises and destroyed pieces of skin. His arms were loose to his waist, and he seemed to walk a little slower than he did normally. Despite that, as he opened his eyes to all the food she prepared, his smile couldn't have been brighter. That boy somehow was smiling through all the obvious pain and tiredness that plagued his body and face. She couldn't tell whether she wanted to be proud of her boy or worried. Well, she was very worried but didn't know she wanted to let him know that. "Breakfast is ready, Izuku." She smiled through her worry as she sat down to enjoy breakfast with her son. He seemed to nod with some vigor before sitting down to eat with her. His appetite became quite more apparent as the days passed, since he began to wolf down what was in front of him. At least he is enjoying it. She couldn't help but think as she smiled at the boy and watched him enjoy the food she made. When all was said and done, packed away his school clothes in his backpack before he put on simple workout clothes and began to head towards the door. "Izuku!" She shouted a little too loudly at her son. She waited as he turned around to her with that same nervous look on his face that he has always had since he was young. Where he got that nervous twitch or how he still flinched when they hugged, she wanted to know so badly. She could still see that tiny boy in her arms as he stared back at her, the door handle in his left hand and the other clutching his large back. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. He didn't say anything at first, he just looked at her with some worry, as if he was being found out about something. Then, as if his heart had changed, he gave her a large smile, still filled with those tired eyes. "Why, yeah." He gave her a strong response, still filled with that nervousness she had expected. He waved to her bye before heading out into the morning darkness, even if the sun had not been on the horizon yet. She put her hand to her heart, to feel that tightness within as she looked back to the door with her boy now gone. "Please, just keep yourself safe." Later after school, Izuku walked through the empty city streets. This part of his neighborhood wasn't typically full of people due to a villain attack that happened a few years back, though that didn't mean there were people in this area, it just meant that it wasn't filled like his own neighborhood. He looked back to his phone to see the address that Lee had sent him yesterday, telling him that today would be the day they started his own, much more difficult training regime. Before it was simply lifting and picking up trash, as well as personal at-home exercises that Lee had told him to do while he was doing homework or writing in his notebook. His body felt heavy. The homework from the start of his new middle school year wasn't hard, it was just a lot from the start, and since he had begun to wake up earlier and earlier as well as staying later to pick up trash on the beach, it meant that his typical day went as follows. Wake up and pick up trash. Go to school and ignore the comments from others. Go back to the beach to pick up more trash. Don't work. Sleep and repeat. This was about as good as he assumed it was going to be for the next few months, and it hadn't even been a full week yet. His own feet hurt, his muscles strained, and he felt tired from the moment he got up to when he fell asleep. He wasn't even sure if there was any actual progress being made. 2 days wasn't enough to tell, but part of him wished that there was some kind pointing to him in the right direction. He sighed to himself as he had made it to a collection of gated houses, colored in deep greens and light tans as he made it to the address. There was a gate, but no button for it to open as he saw Lee standing out by the gate as he opened it as soon as Izuku had gotten close. "You made it a little early too." You checked his phone as the two of them entered the house. Despite the damage done by the villain, the house was relatively nice. Green grass and small planted flowers by the entrance that kept its appearance nice and peaceful. "This place is so nice. Did you clean all of this up 2 days?" Izuku asked as he walked next to Lee. Had a lot of time on my hands, some money in pocket, and I prefer my places of stay to at least be nice on the in and outside. You had stated opening the door to the house. Wait, you bought this house? Izuku stated. Of course, if I'm going to protect and train you, we need a place where we can do it not only comfortably but decent secrecy. It wouldn't be good if others knew where I was actually from, or know that I'm not from here. You said as they both entered the house. It was a decently furnished home, with a set of stairs off to the side entrance and a thin hallway that led to the dining room and kitchen. Off to the left was the living room, still without a television, but a nice sofa and chair. How did you even afford all this? Izuku said as his eyes bulged out of his head as he took off his red shoes. My phone allows me to prove my ID of being older or younger depending on what I need. It works with pretty much every system, so I decided to take a big gamble. You said as he remembered betting it all on black. Wow. That must be some incredible technology. Is that stuff from your world common? Izuku asked with stars in his eyes, clearly interested in the device you was still holding. Sort of, I don't remember much about where I'm from, but I think there was a lot of stuff like that. You said as he moved towards a door at the back of the living room. He opened it as he went down the wooden stairs. Must be hard, being so far from home. Izuku muttered to himself, not really wanting you to hear it. It can be, but I don't have much back there anymore. Makes me realize how thankful I am to have nothing to remember it, keeps me distracted. Izuku was surprised by the outlook of his situation. He believed in heavily about what he wanted to do and his own goal, that not having something holding him back was better. Was that just because he didn't know much about his past? Izuku walked down into the basement as he was surprised by what he saw. It was an almost boxing gym layout, with a large center platform with rope around it acting as barriers. There were training dummies at the back of the area as well as simple but effective workout machines. Out to the side, Izuku saw a larger open area that was more like a small room. It had very little within besides the room being soundproof, much like the main room. What is this place? Izuku said as his eyes widened with excitement and wonder. This will be your home away from home. This is where I will teach you how to fight and build yourself up from where you are now. You said as he began to take off his large hoodie, leaving him in his socks and black tank top. What about that side room? Izuku asked while he pointed to the room off to the left. That is the fighting space we'll use that when start sparring for real. For now, this room will do as we build you up. You said as he went into the middle boxing platform and started stretching. Izuku placed his backpack down as he quickly changed into his workout clothes, trying not to get his school uniform dirty. You looked towards the small boy as he finished changing before calling up to him. Let's get started. Join me up here, Izuku. You stated. You can just call me Midoriya if you would like, no need to say my first name. Izuku said as he crawled through the rope and onto the platform. But, I want to call you by your first name. You acted innocent as a small golden light appeared behind him. Izuku felt instantly flustered as he just nodded. Right, Lee-san. He bowed. Zhao. We are going to be with each other for a while, might as well start now. He said stretching his legs. Izuku couldn't help the way his face flustered up from that as he simply balled his fists as a chibi Izuku appeared. You-san. He answered as sweat drops appeared all over him. See easy. Now for the training. You looked towards Izuku as he took a small battle stance like a boxer as Izuku was already worried. We need to test your skills. You may not have had the skills of a fighter, but there are innate traits that will make someone good at fighting. Being perspective, having good footwork or solid balance, things that can be trained but aren't necessary that way. And how will we figure that out? We are going to fight, start by going all out on me, and I'm going to try my best to hit you back. You announced as he got closer to the center of the ring. We're going to fight? Izuku almost wanted to cry. I need accurate data, as much as I can get from doing this. I promised you this won't be easy, but if you can get through this then you have lots of potential. Izuku didn't know what to say. He simply put up a very weak guard to protect his face as you approached. You didn't move for a bit as he analyzed the way Izuku moved, or rather didn't move, the jittering of his body, his smaller limbs. Remember, this is just a test, but I want you to try your absolute best. Izuku nodded as he noticed that you still wasn't making the first move. Izuku wanted to move, wanted to attack in some way before he could strike back, but he didn't even know where to start. You looked as if he was built out of iron. His arm muscles were like trunks from a tree, his fists and knuckles scarred and bruised from what he only assumed was his constant fighting. You looked young, but his eyes spoke of experience. He would have to try something you had never seen if he was going to try his best. His mind was racked with those constant thoughts, that he didn't even notice you already moving up to him at a blazing speed. He's already her, Izuku thought before he felt the full force of Yu's punch rocket into his stomach. Everything faded in black as he felt himself being lifted into the air. His lungs hurt. His stomach screamed in pain so intense that he felt everything saved up in his gut was going to let loose in a flurry of bile. He was already lifted off the air, the strength of the blow lifting him into the well-lit light above as he began to fall back down. I can't breathe. I have to speak. Everything hurts so much. How did he push me up so high in the first punch? Izuku felt that way as his body slammed into the platform and his breath returning to him. He could breathe once more as he coughed up the air inside his lungs. He landed on his back as he forced his way up and his head down in case he vomited on the floor. He looked to the side to see that it was simply a solid punch to the stomach. Yu's fist was still in the position it was as he punched. He reeled it back and went for a wild charge towards Izuku. He had to think fast, use whatever method he could to try and land a blow on you. I don't think I can beat him, but I have to. Izuku barely realized just how fast Yu was moving. He was already on him as Izuku raised up his arms to defend as a straight kick went into his arms and knocked them back, and the force of the kick sent his entire chest reeling. How is he this strong? This wasn't like a punch or an explosion from Bakugo, it was like a whole new level. His punch and kick felt calculated, like he knew exactly how to throw it to hit for maximum damage. It wasn't just the pure force, though that was a large part of it too. Izuku felt his arms land onto the platform as Yu had leaned down to pick up the small boy with one arm. He swung him into a circle, before slamming him into the floor and letting his leg go. His eyes felt way too heavy. Izuku wanted to just let those tired eyes of his close before anything else would happen, but he just couldn't yet. He wanted to understand what was happening, even if it meant that he would look weak. Yu had already stretched his shoulder back as he waited for Izuku to make a move. Any move would do, but part of this test was about understanding the boy's mental strength. Getting hit was one thing, doing something stupid when your life was on the line was another, but being able to get back up in the face of adversity is something you can't just teach. Even if he didn't have that, he would try to teach him anyway. In part, you didn't want to tell him about this either, but they only knew each other for about 2 days. It would be such a break of trust for him to just attack him with only the intent to train and learn from him. It was not worth making the boy feel worse about himself, but he had to do something. He almost wanted to tell Izuku to stop right now. It was clear the boy was not used to fighting, not even a little bit. He had no self-confidence to even throw something back, or the tenacity to even hit him a delicate spot. He was just trying to protect himself, which is valuable information, but Izuku was trying his best not to cry from the pain, like the earthquake shaking in his chest or the deep scrapes against his arms from the kick. Yu was a lot more powerful than he was, that was a fact, but this made him feel something different. It was a complete mess from the start, a punch to the stomach, and then grabbed and thrown around like a toy. He felt so weak. That word stuck in the front of his thoughts. The useless, weak little nothing who just sat there and took it. Nothing had changed from kindergarten to now. He could almost picture the scene before him. He was still Deku even now. He saw the bright sun of the mid-afternoon day as he lied on his back. The bruises and the cuts scraped his face and arms, and they ruined his favorite shoes. He could see Bakugo's hair walk away from his vision, the laughing of his friends, and the soft tears of someone, probably him. He didn't remember who that person was that he was trying to help. He didn't think it really mattered at the time, and since they never spoke or met afterward, it didn't really matter now. He was still in the basement with you, not in that place anymore. He could see him watching him, staring down at him. His purple eyes analyzing and judging him on his combat abilities. It hurt all over. He didn't want to get back up. Yet he did. He didn't know why he did. He didn't understand as he pushed his arms away from the floor and used all the strength in his body to pick himself up off the ground before he grabbed onto the twin ropes that caused the two fighters within. Izuku breathed heavily before he looked back up to you as he cracked his neck. His eyes widened and then went back to his stoic look he normally had. He prepared back the boxing pose as he pushed his left leg in front of himself. He is going to go for my legs next. I need to attack lower, Izuku said to himself as he put his hands in front of him, a trick to make you confused at his next option. You simply lunged forward with his left shoulder, keeping himself charging forward. Izuku saw this as the moment they were only 2 feet in distance, as he lunged forward to try and get to his legs. You noticed this as if he defied the laws of inertia themselves, and stopped instantly, watching as Izuku fell to the ground and tumble a bit. You stopped as he saw Izuku struggling to get back up, his body already tired from the workout beforehand. He watched the boy struggle to his feet, as he simply placed his arms underneath and helped him up. That was good. I apologize for all the damage. I just needed to know how you stopped talking as he looked at Izuku as tears waterfalled down his face. You didn't say anything besides waiting for Izuku to say something. He finally muttered out. Why what? You asked. Am I so weak? He asked mostly to himself. His tears kept falling onto the mat as you supported him as the boy closed his eyes and began to nod off. The tiredness clearly affected him as he was almost asleep the instant he had some support. You sighed as he placed the green child down and placed his much larger hoodie on top of the boy before he sat down as well. He looked up to the light glaring at both as he sighed in frustration. You're not the only one who asks that, Izuku. You said as he let himself just be in the moment. 5 months later. Izuku Midoriya didn't realize how much 5 months went by in the blink of an eye. It felt like it was only yesterday when he had started picking up trash and moving it with all might in his beat-up truck. The strain from his muscles still reminding him of the early days when he wanted to just go home and quit. Yet he didn't. Everything up until that fateful day when he had met All Might and Zhao you felt like a nightmare. An endless, grueling torment that was his life, though not without its share of good times. He wondered when it got better. It was only when his hero, the #1 hero, told him he could be a hero, that day meant everything to the nervous wreck of a middle schooler. Since then, he never let anyone or anything bring him down, at least enough to make him quit. He reminded himself of all the grueling extra work you had given to him as they both worked and trained in his own personal gym below his nicely furnished home. Every day of hits and blood on his knuckles. After the first day, it was basic exercises to build endurance. Basic mile-long runs and extra time in the swimming pool during the summer helped go the extra distance. After a month or 2 of building up exercise, he decided to add endurability to the mix. Along with the mixed workout of running, jogging and high-intensity workout plans, he added in defense class. This is where Izuku learned how to defend himself, though throwing a punch was still way off according to himself. It was more about how to defend against certain attacks. He was still getting, of course, but it wasn't purely meant for him to be a punching bag against Yu's attack. He learned how to guard and protect more sensitive parts of his body with his arms and legs, as he began to get used to dodging. He was still stiff, according to you, but the progress was rather drastic as a result. That wasn't the only drastic thing that had started to change. Izuku didn't particularly notice at any point in his training, but he began to show signs of muscle growth. At first it wasn't much. Small things like his arms getting bigger and his running speed to school and home had improved, but after these last few months, even he noticed. His body was no longer spindly and wiry. He was still on the small side, though not that he really cared, but his improvement was miraculous. His arms, forearms and overall chest were much larger than before, giving him a lean build hidden by his school uniform and his freckled face. Though arguably, the parts that got much better were in his legs. He never really noticed any growth with his legs, but if you knew what you were looking for, you could tell just how much he had grown. His overall calf size went up significantly, as his toned calf and thigh showed without him needing to flex at all. If anything, his growth was too unexpected, as you had decided to change his schedule. It was a warm August night as Izuku had already walked down into the basement and had changed his clothes into his All Might t-shirt and long pants, though the shirt looked a lot more fitting on his new body than a sleep shirt. He was already out of his hoodie and now was in a t-shirt and shorts as he sipped down on some milk tea he had in a large mug. That was one thing Izuku noticed, his fascination or rather his addiction to milk tea. Most days, you didn't go a single hour without taking a sip from some he had already gotten beforehand, though Izuku assumed that because he didn't have need for a job now, it was mostly fine. He must really like boba, I wonder. Izuku's thoughts were jumbled to the idea in his head, but he decided to disregard it for now as he stepped onto the platform. You had put his drink down before stretching his neck. Good you're here, he said before facing the boy. Why yeah, you asked me to come after dinner. I hope we aren't doing anything with me getting punched in the stomach? His breath was a little hitched as he thought back to all the times he threw up. No, there should be none of that. Though, we are going to be changing up your schedule. You had grabbed the papers for the All-American Dream Plan and handed them to Izuku. The paper was edited and changed so much that you just decided to make a new one every time a change was made. Izuku grabbed it before looking over the changes into his schedule. He noticed how combat training was moved up to today and that it would be the dominant focus of the rest of the time. I thought you said you wanted combat training to be after I finished cleaning up the beach. Isn't this too soon? Izuku said as bits of comedic sweat went everywhere. I thought so too, but to be honest, you wanted to say something now as he looked towards Izuku's new body. Izuku's growth has been so much, he wanted to just skip to the part where he taught him to fight. Do I tell him though? He wasn't sure whether to let the boy know about his amazing progress, or to just show him. He decided on the former. You didn't take any time as he lunged towards Izuku, the same move he did on their first day of training. Izuku was still stun-locked before as he was surprised at the speed you was moving at, but he didn't freeze up like before, his eyes became sharper, more focused as he dropped the papers quickly and his legs went back to support himself. His arms went up to focus on blocking the punch to his stomach. Yu's punch rocked into Izuku's forearms as he could still feel how much force he was putting into the punch. Izuku moved back simply from the force, but he was easily able to block the attack as his forearms felt the stress of the attack. Yu smirked a bit as he stood back up after his attack and walked back to the center. Good. Very good. Yu said as he sipped from his cup of milk tea. Izuku's face was shrouded in a sad aura as B pointed at you. Why you said you wouldn't do that? Izuku stammered on. I did, and I lied. Never trust what your opponent says. Yu stated as if his deception was clear. That's not fair. Izuku leaned down in sadness. Many things aren't fair, but that's what we are here to teach you. Combat training is going to begin today, where I'm going to teach you ways to fight and will find your own fighting style. You pointed to him. My own fighting style? Izuku said he finally let his guard down. Yes, learning about how people fight is good, knowing how to counter those ways is good, but the body is always going to favor one way of fighting. Your body is going to have the best results when you learn to HRNSS one way of fighting. You said as he pulled out his phone and pushed a button. There is a simple rendition of Izuku and him stood next to each other as you continued to speak. Your body is unique to you, just as any quirk would be. Which means that we are going to have to find out the best way for you to fight and then hone that to perfection. The two renditions began to fight as the image went away. If I'm going to get All Might's quirk, wouldn't it be easier to do the things that he's good at? His smash attacks are powerful enough to change the weather. Doesn't that mean I can do that too? Izuku fiddled with his fingers nervously. Of course you can, and if One for All improves the power every time it's handed to someone else, you will eventually do more than even Toshinori can do. Izuku thought of himself as an image of him standing in a city with his fist raised like All Might appeared in his head. His face flushed in embarrassment at the thought. There's only one thing wrong with that thinking. You explained. There is. Izuku replied with confusion. You aren't him, and you will never be. The bluntness of his statement made Izuku shatter like glass as he looked like it had just been broken on the outside. He then was kneeling on the ground in sadness. You don't have to be so mean about it. The aura of sadness only grew as he sat on the floor. Yu sighed as he simply helped Izuku up. Not like that, Izuku. I mean you aren't him, literally. You are Midoriya Izuku, he is Toshinori Yagi. It's not like you can't hit those attacks like him, but your body might be better off doing something else. Only time will tell. He looked back up at his mentor as he had a small frown on his face. He didn't think about it like that, being someone like All Might was his dream. Okay. That is all he could say in response. Now, we need to get started. I think it's best I start by teaching you how to throw a punch, then we can get into specifics about how you'll fight later. This perked up Izuku a little bit as he stood to pay attention. Yu threw his fist back in demonstration as he looked towards Izuku. He anchored his right foot down, and he twisted his hip in the same direction as the punch, as he twisted his fist to the left. In one swift motion, he jabbed right in front of Izuku as the wind pressure alone made his hair move. Just like that you had a boxer's perfect form for a punch. He reeled his fist back and felt up his fingers for discomfort. We will be training you how to throw punches and kicks first, then we will streamline the process down between how each fighting style or martial art uses its own strengths and weaknesses to fight. Got it? You waited for a response, and when none came, he looked back to see that Izuku's eyes were dead as he looked like he had been knocked out, yet he was still standing. You didn't notice how just the tip of his finger touching and hitting Izuku in his chin had made him down for the count. Izuku fell forward as he was out cold. You sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. Sorry, Izuku. 3 months later, 2 months before the exam. Toshinori Yagi yawned as he was driving in his beat-up truck as he just finished getting ready to start another day of cleanup duty with his young student. It had already been 8 months of intense work, and he wasn't giving up the good fight, so he was ready to help his successor in whatever way he could. He sipped on coffee he had gotten beforehand since it was way too early for him to be up, but he didn't mind it anymore. All this time spent in the morning made it easier for him to have better set goals and achievable things throughout the day, so he couldn't complain too much. When he came to a stop sign, he decided to look through his phone, making sure that neither Midoriya nor Yu had left him any messages from the night previous or just in general. He didn't spend a lot of time on it, otherwise he would only get attached to the darn thing. One thing did pop up though in his notifications. It was the picture he had taken of Izuku 8 months ago as they first started his training. He was still crying in that t-shirt that All Might couldn't help but chuckle at when he first saw it. He truly is a fanboy, All Might couldn't help but say as he wondered just how much real progress the boy had made. He tried to check in on his progress with his combat training with Yu, but it was quite difficult with all the hero work, and having to finish all his paperwork and job preparation with Yue. He had planned to tell both boys about him getting the job in. At first, he thought it might be good to know simply as motivation, since Midoriya was such a big fan of him and the school, one could see it as proper motivation to have both your idol and your favorite school be in the same place. He ultimately decided against this. Maybe the boy would also think about it as cheating to get in, and that wouldn't be worth the risk. The boy already had too many issues about himself, All Might didn't want to risk things being worse. He continued the drive as he got one more notification on his phone. This time it was Yu. Li Zhao Yu. Yo, come pick me up please. Toshinori couldn't believe what he was reading as he was going to respond in earnest to the request, but he realized that it would just be a waste of time. That boy had ways of just asking and then making things happen, so he didn't really want to waste the time meant to ask him something pointless. Another message went off as All Might sighed as he looked at it. Li Zhao Yu. Also, could you pick me up something to drink? I ran out of those pot things. Toshinori simply sighed as he took a left to go pick up the boy. Thanks, Toshinori. You said as he sat in the passenger seat of the truck as he began sipping a plastic cup with a straw in it filled with, you know. He slurped obnoxiously as Toshinori was just focusing on trying to drive the car. You know, you could have asked me earlier. I doubt you wouldn't be awake at this time anyway. He simply said. Correct, but you're the one who said I shouldn't be using my powers with no regard to the law. You stated. Because you were, young Li. All Might snapped at him. I can't help that my body is that of someone with super strength, it's not even my real powers. He said as he sipped more of his drink. That was something All Might hadn't expected him to say. The older man looked to the boy as he looked back to the road. What is your quirk, Youngly. I don't think you've had the pleasure of telling us. All Might asked, turning a corner. Since you bought me this drink, I can tell you a bit. Just a bit, and all because I bought him milk tea? All Might said with dead eyes. My actual ability is akin to energy manipulation, but its application is limited in how I can do it. Energy manipulation? That sounds like a very useful quirk to have. What are these applications that can be used? All Might asked, now starting to pay attention to what he was hearing. Best way I can describe it is, I can create things. Mostly shields, but other things aren't out of the realm of possibilities. You can create shields? What do you mean by other things? All Might pushed a little farther, trying to understand the man's choice of wording. For a basic idea, I can create things with the energy my body creates. Shields, platforms, things like that are easy, but it's not limited to those things. I can't create weapons or tools, but stairs or even a ladder isn't too annoying. I can also dismantle areas using the energy, but it's a little bit of a slower process. You explained. That is quite impressive, so your body is just naturally strong as a result of your upbringing? Yes. You seemed to hesitate to say anything else, as if any more information may have made him say something he didn't want to say. All Might caught on to this but decided to say anything with it. The boy already didn't seem to like to say much about himself, so having even just his ability explained was good enough for him, for now. Sooner or later, he would have to ask him, but for now he was good with what he said. They finally arrived at the beach as Toshinori parked the car and placed his coat back on. The weather in December around here could get chilly. He was also excited as he waited for Toshinori to walk up as they both felt the chill of the very early morning breeze. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, as its shimmering glow came upon the ocean's beautiful waves. You breathed out slowly before swirling around his drink. Feels nice to just be for a bit, he muttered to himself. Toshinori picked up what he said but decided to leave it be. Whatever he had going on in his past, it would be for later. They just enjoyed the breeze as. Aya! A triumphant roar came thundering out from around the platform before the sandy beach. They both walked faster as they came above to see the cause of the scream. They're on top of a massive pile of garbage that stacked almost as high as 2 cars on top of each other. Izuku screamed his lungs out. His body glistened with sweat and tiny bits of oil and dirt from the workout. You couldn't believe what he was seeing, though part of him figured he would be done sooner than later. He couldn't believe it all the same. Over the past 8 months, this boy single-handedly cleared the entire beach. He looked out to the clear sand and the crashing ocean of winter, the chill still apparent in the air, but it didn't matter right now. All that mattered was that it was done, everything was done. Even more so. A portion of the beach also had its trash cleared away, the part that he knew Toshinori said that he didn't have to clean. He did it anyway. Izuku, despite everything, all the pain, struggle, lack of sleep, he did it anyway. He still stood on the pile of trash, his chest pushing up and down to get more and more air into them so he could scream once more. It wasn't agony or pain in his voice, it was pure bliss, a victory call that he was singing to anyone that would listen. Maybe there was some of that pain and sorrow in there from before, maybe it still lingered in the boy's heart, but for right now, he was on top of the world. His own trash pile world. Toshinori was the first to speak up as he stood over to look at the beach in its entirety. Hey! You even cleaned outside of the area I told you. You didn't have to do that, kid. Toshinori was stunned at the boy's hard work, still shaking from pride. He looked back at you who was just standing there with a small grin. All that hard work. I suppose it makes sense, considering who he is. You did as he walked up closer to the boy who had just finished screaming his heart out. Toshinori simply gripped his fists as a smile came slithering up on his face. Oh my goodness. All Might quickly transformed into his muscled form as he screamed at the top of his lungs as well. It was only then that you saw Izuku begin to slowly lose his balance on the top as he fell towards the sand. In an instant he was at the beach as he caught the boy in both arms. Izuku looked up with a small smile towards you as the bigger boy just nodded to him. Good job, Izuku. I did it, he said weakly. All Might came upon the beach as in one massive swoop of his large arms embraced both in a bear-crushing hug. He laughed his signature All Might as both boys felt their bones crushed. Well done you two. You've both done so well. And with so much time to spare before the U.A exam, we seem to be moving right on time. Haha. Thank you, All Might. He said as if his voice was giving out from the squeeze. Stop squeezing us, you big lug. You said as a cross of anger appeared on his face. All Might let go with a small chuckle as he pulled out his phone and put it in front of Izuku's face. Izuku looked confused as he saw a picture of himself, almost exactly 8 months ago. In part he couldn't even believe in himself this far. You, he could only stutter out from his tiredness. It's you, crying 8 months ago? Look at how much you've grown. All Might replied as he motioned for Izuku to look at his own progress. You examined that Izuku's body. While it didn't get much bigger, his muscles were a lot leaner and denser than others. His small body might not have changed much, but that didn't mean pure strength didn't lie within that frame of his. With that notion, you looked back to Izuku with his arms crossed. How much earlier did you show up, by the way? He asked with an eyebrow raise. Izuku sheepishly rubbed his head. Only like an hour or so. You just rolled his eyes. Never mind that, boys. We are here to celebrate young Midoriya's success. There is still a long road ahead of you before you can inherit my full power, but it's starting to look like you can do it. All Might announced as the sun finally shined down on the three. Izuku looked over to see you watching him. His eyes softened just a bit as Izuku also saw All Might smiling down on him. His heart beat fast as he held out his hand and looked at it, as if in the palm of his hand was his weak self. He crushed that hand into a fist as the tears flowed out of his eyes in droves. All Might-tun, do I really deserve all this? Both men looked at him incredulously before he faced them both. You guys put so much time and effort into helping me, how did I end up being so lucky? All Might looked like he was going to say something but then looked to you. He smiled as he slapped the boy on the back, waiting for him to say something to the new successor. You sighed as he walked over to Izuku and lightly knocked him on the head. Doesn't matter how much time and effort we put into someone unwilling to put in the hard work to get it done. Don't act like we were the only ones putting in effort. That was you. You said, poking him in the chest, causing him to flinch. All Might smiled at the two boys before he put his shoulder over Izuku. Well done, Izuku Midoriya. In the sincerest way he could say it, he was proud. Izuku could only nod, shaking away the tears in his eyes. All Might quickly plucked a hair from his right tuft in his muscle form and looked at Izuku. Now for your reward, young Midoriya. Izuku could only nod as his hero held out a piece of his hair. Eat this. Izuku deadpanned as the hair glistened in the morning sun. You had already sighed as he quickly grabbed the hair from All Might. Both looked confused as Izuku tried to open his mouth, but he immediately felt someone's enter his mouth. You had already placed the hair in his mouth as he quickly took his hand out from Izuku's mouth and wiped it off on his hoodie. Izuku was trying to say something but was confused at the immediate motion from his friend. In his haste to speak, he had immediately swallowed the hair in a quick motion as he breathed out quickly. From the moment he began choking on his hair. He looked at you with tears in his eyes as he shivered. We aren't doing some song and dance. He asked you do it so you could inherit the power through D. Don't be stupid, Izuku, I know you aren't. Izuku wanted to speak but he just slouched in defeat. Young Midoriya. All Might responded in surprise. The boy simply shook his head as he stretched his hands and arms, as if waiting for something to happen. Am I supposed to feel different? Not yet, young man. It's going to take a few hours for your body to digest the hair and the power to transfer to your system. Once that happens, you will have one for all. All Might said as he began to walk back to the truck to get rid of the remaining trash. I suppose we will have to wait to test out how far you can do with one for all. You said as his eyes opened as if he remembered something. Didn't you say that his body would most likely not be able to handle the power of one for all once he got it? I did, and I don't think any amount of training from you would have changed that. However, with that in mind, I think it is important we have somewhere to test out your new powers, young Midoriya. Where would that be? Izuku asked as his head tilted. Can't be in my house. If even you had a fraction of Toshinori's power, I don't think my space could even handle all of that. You stated. None of those. We are going to have to go the one place where they account for those with strong quirks. All Might pointed to the sky. He then jumped towards the platform before the beach and pointed to his car. We are going to. He was going to finish his statement, but he puffed into his smaller form with blood coming out of his mouth. All Might. Izuku screamed as both him and you were waiting for him to announce where they were going. All Might simply stood there for a second as he pointed back to his car. To you.A. He just went on. Both you and Izuku thought with dead eyes. 2 hours later, Izuku couldn't believe he was standing before the gates of UA. His legs shook like jelly like him. All Might and you all stood before it. All Might put his hands on his hips with some pride, as he also held up his phone. Welcome boys, to the best hero school in the nation. All Might said as all three of them started to walk closer. You seemed to examine his surroundings even more, trying to place what kind of school this truly was before making any more assumptions he already had. They all three entered the building before they met with the large, almost college campus structure that the entire building had, which was 4 separate buildings combined into one central compound. Izuku had stars in his eyes as he could do nothing but gush about his favorite school. Oh my goodness! This is the esteemed U.A. It's so much more lavish than I thought. Even in the interviews they do about the school, I thought it couldn't compare. I can't believe that All Might graduated from here. It makes me think that mumble. Izuku said as the hallways began to fill with his ramblings. Please, Izuku. There could still be people here that hear you. That got him to quiet down as he blushed bashfully. There aren't any students here. They are having their winter break right now, so there shouldn't be any students here. Though there might be some faculty. All Might note as he and you were next to each other as Izuku was too busy fanboying around the classrooms and overall layout of the building. You seemed to notice something as he spoke. Should you really be in your small form even if there are faculty? What if they see you in your smaller form? You questioned. Not very many people know about my smaller form, even if I don't really understand that either. We are meeting up with someone who also knows about my smaller form and one for all. We are also going to need her if we are trying to test young Midoriya's ability with one for all. Toshinori explained. How many people know about one for all? He asked incredulously. Enough, those that absolutely need to know. If I could tell others I would. Having you know about it is probably too much already, but Toshinori hesitated before giving a solid smile. You seem strong and wise enough to not tell anyone. You seemed to appreciate the answer as he looked away. Before he could phase out of the conversation, he felt Toshinori grab his shoulder as a look of seriousness was all over it now. I also wanted to thank you individually. You seemed so off-putting at first, like there was something else that you wanted. I am glad to know that is not the case, that you are here to support the boy trying his best. Maybe you don't see the lad that same way I do, but if you are putting this much time into him, then I think you see something too. Toshinori smiled at the end, to ease the tension away. You held the thought for a moment before looking away and still walking down the hall. Izuku is odd. I haven't met a person like him or at least remember someone like him. I will admit that I've had to change my methods with him. He isn't the same as the other sparks I've met. Toshinori waited as the silence between them hung still. But I will do what I can all the same. You finished. Toshinori smiled at him before patting him on the back in pride. All three men walked through the hallways as something came around the corner. Toshinori's eyes widened as he saw the small animal creature that was the U.A principal. Principal Nizu? Toshinori exclaimed. You looked towards the small animal creature. He had a mouse head completely white with a large scar over his right eye. He had paws of some creature and a small tail. He was also dressed, rather well, with a white dress shirt along with a black tailcoat over it and some orange sneakers. You didn't seem too fazed by the creature itself. It wasn't even close to the weirdest thing he has seen in this world in general, but he certainly wasn't normal. The creature also stood rather well and bore the eyes of someone always analyzing the world around him. Good evening, Toshinori-san. I assumed that you were here to meet with Recovery Girl and I. Otherwise, I'm not sure why you would call us here. Nizu said with a smile that it looked all too malicious. Wise. I was trying to use and maybe procure the use of the field today. I am trying to demonstrate the power of one for all to my new successor. He motioned over for Izuku as the boy walked up closer to the small creature. Izuku bowed low politely towards Nizu. It's an honor to meet such an esteemed animal as yourself. To the school it's an honor to be here. Izuku stammered. Nizu chuckled at the boy's excitement. You must be Izuku Midoriya. I expected Toshinori-san would want to show off his new successor soon, but it seems he wanted to jump the gun a bit. Nizu then looked towards the boy in purple, watching how he looked and perceived the world around him. You must be the other mentor Toshinori-san mentioned, Li Zhao-kun? Nizu asked with that same smile. Just you don't have to add anything else with it. He mentioned. He then pointed to the small creature. I also can't really believe you're the principal. I didn't know animals could have quirks. Izuku and Toshinori looked dead inside as he mentioned that with their mouths agape. Nizu seemed to laugh harder at this before staring up at him with no hint of malice. Most animals don't seem to have quirks like mine, so maybe I should just take this as a compliment. It's also not the first time I was outed for being the way I am. You seem to find some semblance of intrigue in the small creature. The scar on his right eye seemed to be an indicator for something, but he didn't want to make assumptions just yet. He already knew that he had information about One for All and Toshinori's actual form, so meaning that either he knew very little about who he was other than Izuku's mentor, or he knew enough to know where he was really from. Either way, it meant that he needed to be careful around Nizu. Is his quirk basic human intelligence, or is it something more than that? If animals are supposed to have quirks, why does he have one? I want to ask, but seems like you have a lot on your mind, Li-kun. I hope it's not all about me. Nizu answered. He was smiling again as if he already knew the answer. Just been a long day. He spoke. It wasn't a lie, but that wasn't truly what was on his mind. So, where are you from? Toshinori-san said you were helping Midoriya-kun with his training to get into U.A. I assume you have the same goal. Me in U.A.? Was that the plan? Now that he thought about it more, what would he do without Izuku being there so he could train him more and more? If U.A. was going to teach and train his power, then his job would be considered done. But he still had to protect the boy. Even if he did get into U.A. and he learned how to use his spark, when would he show up? That question was burning in his mind since he came here. The fact that he hadn't shown up yet meant they had more time. But how much more? That question seemed to confuse him, enough that he didn't notice how much deeper he was in thought to the actual question. He had to think quickly, what could he tell the principal that would get him off of his? Seems like that might be quite a complicated question. Usually someone just says a name or a town they hail from. If the question was so complicated, I didn't think you'd be waiting for me to say something else. Are you perhaps? Nizu questioned as the smile remained, that dim smile. This creature. I think he knows I'm not just a simple person. You said as he let himself go from the question as both Izuku and Toshinori were freaking out. What is Yu-kun going to say, All Might? Izuku whispered to his hero. I don't know. I think either way, Nizu will know. The hero responded back. Izuku knew that you didn't particularly like being asked questions about where he was from. He had barely answered him when he spoke, so even now both standing there waiting for an answer. It's so nerve-wracking. Izuku thought to himself as he shivered. Maybe we should just talk about it privately, yes? Nizu said as he walked away from the other two men. We can have a chat, me and you in my office, away from prying eyes and ears. The last part of his statement didn't seem like a question anymore, but since he didn't really have any authority over him, he didn't have to go. All right. You said. He agreed? Izuku and Toshinori thought to themselves. You seemed to notice their worry as he sighed. Don't worry about me, it's not like I'm trying to hide anything, plus. He seemed to wait a second before answering. It seems like I have more to think about now than I did before. Having someone else with a different perspective might help. Great! Nizu said as he clapped his hands. Midoriya-kun and Toshinori-san can go use the field through those doors out there, while me and Yukuen can have a talk in my office for a bit. I'll send him out when we're done," he said as he began to walk away from the other two. You seemed to just roll his shoulders and walk with the principal towards the location of his office. Both Toshinori and Izuku stood next to each other, still the same dopey look on their faces from before. "I hope everything turns out okay. He hasn't even told us anything like that," Izuku muttered. "Me too. Nizu might look all innocent and charming, but his intelligence makes him quite a handy ally, even worse as an enemy. I would hope he doesn't say much to set him off," Toshinori replied earnestly. Izuku waited a second before blurting out something. I just want to know what he will do now with all that information." Toshinori sighed in contempt as he placed his hand on the shoulder of the green-haired boy. "There is not much we can do now. Let's just hope whatever path he had in life, Nizu will understand it." The tension was beginning to settle down as Izuku breathed out some of the stress before Toshinori pointed outside. "Let's hurry up and get some one-for-all action before it gets too cold," he announced as he walked towards the door. Izuku nodded as he simply hoped that you was truthful about who he was. You opened the sliding door as he let Nizu pass through him into the small office space. Despite what he assumed, it was as simple as a principal's office could be, at least from what he assumed they were like. "When was the last time I was in a school?" he thought to himself as Nizu walked towards his rolling office chair, and with an adorable jump, he was able to get into the seat as he motioned for you to sit. With a single motion you sat down on the chair opposite the small creature. Nizu seemed to reach under his desk as he pulled out a small kettle, already warm from being heated up in the kettle. "Just how?" you questioned as Nizu pulled out 2 cups before pouring 2 cups of green tea. "Tea?" Nizu asked casually before taking his own. You just seemed to reach over and grab the other cup before sipping it graciously. He's had other types of tea before, but it wasn't milk tea, so part of him wanted to reject the liquid, but he kept strong. "So, I thought we could keep ourselves in relative check with your relationship with both Toshinori-san and Midoriya-san. With that, I just wanted to ask you some questions to help us both out." You hesitated for a second before looking at Nizu carefully. "Is there a purpose to this? I'm sure you already know about my connection to the two. I know about One for All and Toshinori's condition. If that is what you request, then I think you already know the answer to any question related to that." Nizu chuckled before sipping on his tea. He noticed that just outside, there had been some light snowfall before it stuck to his window outside. "I know about that stuff already. Nothing gets past me in this school. I would like to say that I've come here to just tell me about who you are, but I'm not sure I would be getting a correct answer." You didn't say much before crossing his arms in frustration. "So, you just want me to tell you who I am, that kind of stuff?" he questioned. "Yes, but understand that anything you tell me might affect how the conversation afterward might go." He smiled lightly. "A threat?" You was starting to understand the kind of person this principal was. He was devious, at least to some extent. If anything, though, he was smart. He thought before piercing his brain for a correct response to what he said. "I need something promised to me, if we are to speak about who I am," you said, almost demanding but coughed to try and change the way he approached the conversation. Nizu raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a promise I can make, though keeping it tends to be much harder for me than others. I know how easily words can be spoken, but keeping them can be much more of a hassle." "Is that a yes?" you exclaimed. "Depends, what is it that you want me to keep in mind?" Nizu remarked before sipping more tea. You shifted in his seat to lean forward. His eyes only focus on the smaller eyes of the creature in front of him. His face had a deadly seriousness to it, so much that it alone could cut steel. Nizu seemed to notice this, his smile faltering into a small frown. "I haven't told this to Izuku or Toshinori-san yet. If anything, I would rather keep that as it is until the time comes," you explained. Nizu looked confused. "When the time comes? Seems like you've got yourself mixed up in some bad business. You expect me not to tell it to the #1 hero and his protege?" "It's not about keeping it a secret, not entirely. You must understand," you thought about his next actions carefully. After a moment he simply sighed and explained. "I'm not from this world. Not this earth anyway. he said with all seriousness. It took a moment before Nizu simply chuckled as he finished his tea before pouring another one into the cup. You don't believe me? You said as he raised an eyebrow. That's not it. I believe you. I guess I was just surprised to hear it from anyone. You only hear those kinds of things from comics and manga, you know? He said as he kept laughing to himself. I see, either way it's the true. Whether you see that as it is or not is up to you. Otherwise, I need you to promise me that I will tell you to stay with us. You demanded once more, no longer holding back. Nizu seemed to scratch his chin for a bit before he sipped more of the tea. All right, but if that's the case then you are going to need to give more of your own story. I need to know who you are, Li Zhao. Who I am. He didn't like the way Nizu said it, as if the person he was all those years ago still wasn't the same as him. He has always been the same. He couldn't change that. Fine. I'll answer any questions you have regarding my past life. He said in finality. Great. Nizu got a little more comfortable in his chair as he stared back at you. Tell me what can you tell me about your childhood? He questioned. Childhood? I've never had anything like that, but I can tell you as much as I can when I woke up. He said sipping some of the tea left. Woke up? It all started with blood on my hands. I don't remember anything before as I watched myself holding a gun soaked in a deep red. I felt cold, like someone had crept under my skin and stayed too long. Everything felt like it was made of ice, and the chill only got worse as I saw the death all around. I was in a suit, a black dress shirt and a maroon, red overcoat that soaked itself well in the blood that was all around me. I could hear myself breathing heavily as around my body was purple outline that highlighted everything around me. My whole vision was shrouded, as if only half of each eye worked, and I was trying my best not to peek through. I looked at the pistol in my hand. It was something more modern, at least that's what my brain processed. It's like that information was put into my mind. I don't remember ever seeing a gun before. What it does and how it felt unfamiliar to me, at least that's how it felt. But truly, as I held the weapon to my head, it was like I've been using it my entire life. Like every single piece of my mind was so lost on what it was, but my body knew. I dropped the weapon in confusion before I truly looked at my surroundings. It was cold winter night. I knew what seasons and stuff were, but some things felt so ingrained in my mind that it was hard to leave. I was surrounded in a small city block. Flashing lights and colors splashed their way into my eyes. Billboards of people I've never seen, food and drinks I would never try, and no one else. The city was empty, not a single sound of footsteps or breathing besides my own. The only other sound in my ears was the dripping of blood and bile that was all around me. I could smell only death, its disgusting trench terror stretching all around me like tendrils. That's when I saw them. I finally saw all the bodies. It must have been at least 100, if not a little more. My brain was looking at each of them quickly, as if I was trying to categorize them, calculating how many there were there. The bodies were each wearing black armor, some kind of plate that vibrated as they died. I could remember this too much as it hitting it reverberated back into my chest. The glass around their helmet was broken, and only some of them had faces that could be recognized by someone else. Each body was either shot, broken beyond repair, or some kind of damage I couldn't register. As if a natural disaster had swept through each one of them before they finally fell. And their blood was on my hands. I wasn't stupid. I knew I did this. I knew how I did this. I could remember each detail, the contrasts around their faces. They died in suffering. Those who didn't care much of a look on them had dead grayed-out eyes that just looked like they died in a singular moment. I couldn't remember any of them. I knew how they died. I could remember their screams and those who spoke before they died, but I didn't know any of them. All their weapons were stretched out onto the street where I stood. It seemed like some of the other ones were trying to run. Some of the other bodies were spread around the city plaza. I was in New York. That I remember as much. I don't know why I knew this. I could hear grunting for a moment as I looked back, and my gun was squeezed into my hand tightly. I held up the gun behind me as I watched the body move closer. It was a woman with long purple hair. She was breathing heavily, and her left arm was missing as she pulled herself closer. She breathed rapidly as she used whatever strength she had to pull out the gun in her right hand and point it towards me. I didn't move, I didn't need to. I remember the shot ringing out as I saw the bullet enter the purple aura around me, absorbing its collision as the aura shattered like glass and the bullet did nothing. She didn't move, she only screamed out in fury before squeezing the trigger and letting loose the remainder of the bullets in her magazine. I quickly moved to the side before running towards her, dodging and weaving only for a moment as her gun quickly ran out of ammo. She stared in defeat as he walked up to her as I looked down towards her. I could see tears of sadness streaming down her face. It was pure unbridled anger that wept onto the cold floor of the street that surrounded us. With a little effort, she opened her mouth as I pointed the gun towards her head. Why you? Everyone. They're gone because of you. All this for a girl. Was all she could make out before I squeezed the trigger and watched her body fall lifelessly. I didn't feel anything, but her words finally registered in my mind. I remembered why I was there. Where is she? I questioned myself before looking over to my left. There, slumping across one of the buildings that looked already halfway destroyed, was the body of a small girl. Her hair was a deep red as much as her clothes were in her own blood. I had moved towards the girls, my feet heavy. I kneeled close to her as I could feel the cold on my gloveless fingers. She was dead, that much was obvious, but I scanned with my fingers around her body, looking for signs. It was only when I saw the hole in her shirt, bullet wound. My mission failed, I had failed. I knew that this was bad. I only stood back up as I heard a shift in sounds. It sounded like something was powering down as I saw the world around me flash and shift like a screen. In an instant, all was gone, and I left in a large open room enclosed like a giant warehouse, with primitive lights that hovered above me. I could no longer feel the cold on my skin and the flashing lights of the city around me. I was now stuck in this large room as I looked back to see windows that couldn't see through behind me. I looked around once more before I saw the same dead bodies around me, the blood leaking through all the same, even on my clothes. The girl was still dead, she was still slumped on the floor, but this time on the wall of the room. I felt like I didn't understand, like someone had changed me too much. I held my head in frustration as I saw someone appear right in front of me. He came through as if he just materialized in front of me like a ghost, but he was real. He was an older gentleman. He wore an armored black suit adorned with 5 different colors: red, purple, blue, green, and white. Each color was a stripe on his armor before he began to clap, his longer white and gray hair moving with his own motion. His skin was too clean, despite the large scar that from the bottom of his chin to the top of his eyebrow on his left side. He had pearly white teeth and seemed unaffected by the death around him. Well done, Asa. It seems like you have been improving slowly but steadily, just like you brothers and sisters. The older man seemed so gentle and kind. I couldn't remember why I knew his name, but I did. It felt like I've known this man my entire life, but when I looked back to find who he was, there was nothing in my mind to remind me of such interactions. Thank Dr. Shield, I said with a bow. He seemed to chuckle in that response. Don't thank me, you've been diligent in your training, and for that I should be thanking you. He replied. It is not needed. I am just doing what is necessary. I could only say before I looked back at my dirty clothes. Still, it is not an easy task. Come, I need you and I have to a small talk before we do what must be done. He motioned for me to follow, and I had no choice but to do so. One moment I was walking beside him in that strange warehouse, and then the next I was standing next to him at a large computer laboratory. There were so many computers and people that were operating on them. The room itself contained large computers connected to 5 centralized machines. Each of these devices looked like a giant vat of some teal substance that seemed to bubble and flow as they were operating. The other people inside wore lab coats and armor of the same kind as the people that died. I couldn't help but look towards the other 4 vats in the room. Each of them contained a person that was floating in the liquid. They had breath tanks on the side of the machine and masks that pumped oxygen into their bodies. That was home. I knew that. Dr. Shield seemed to look towards me as, on the other side of the room, there was a giant projector as a group of 3 scientists seemed to look over the data. Dr. Shield took me that way before we all watched over the data. It was me, my body and specs that I was given, Even the number of breaths I took was calculated into the large diagram. In the bottom right corner of the screen was the recording of me killing all those people. I watched as my body moved faster and faster, bullets and muzzles flaring into the screen as blood was splashed and thrown about and leaking onto the city floor. It looked like every movement and action I took was documented near the bottom of the screen. I could only watch as I finally saw the little girl that was watching over as I killed everything. She watched in horror as her defenders slaughtered mercilessly and so easily. I never realized how easy I killed. You did well, Asa. Do not blame her death on yourself. Dr. Shield patted me on the back quickly. I still failed. My head was lowered, as if I felt some shame in watching her die. Yes, but you won't in the future. For now, it is your job, your right to fail and fail time and time again. In the future, you will not have that option. Dr. Shield said before removing his hand from my back. How do you know I won't fail? I asked introspectively. Dr. Shield just laughed as he looked back at me. Oh, you will fail. However, just like everything and everyone, you will have chances to prove yourself. Just like today. Where I failed. I replied quickly. Correct, but remember. He seemed to say quickly as I could only stare at my shoe and sockless feet. We are here to protect those who cannot. Find and save those lost children who have a spark of hope within them. Be their defender. He seemed to place his fist onto my chest as he smiled. Once you know that, you will never give up the good fight. He said with a light chuckle. I seemed to remember feeling happy then, maybe because it was his kind words, or maybe he just felt like I needed to smile that day. He seemed to motion for me to follow him once more as I did such. He walked through what felt like an endless set of hallways that I never remember entering in the first place, before we came upon a set of stairs. We both walked together up the stairs. I could no longer feel that stifling air inside those rooms. How have you been getting used to your powers, ISO? He asked with slight interest. Fine enough. In truth, I never truly understood how any of the things I could do truly work. I remember having them, and a small time where I didn't. Those, however, weren't memories. They were more like points of pain that seemed to linger on my body where scars had already thrived. It was like a reminder of something that was carved into me long ago. They say that phantom pain comes from losing a limb, but to me, it felt like I've always had that sense of numbing pain that never went away. Dr. Shield seemed to not be truly pleased with that answer as he held out his hand, inviting me to hold it. I did as instructed as I grabbed his hand with gentleness. I knew I could crush his hand easily, but I needed to limit it. We kept walking up the long flight of stairs before he flexed his arms slowly and I could see the soft glowing purple glow hover around my hand. It was my strength. My spark of hope seemed to brighten more when he held onto my hand. He was so kind. He never asked for me to do things I could not do, only to push myself and let myself get stronger. He kept holding my hand as he seemed to analyze it intensely. You seem to have a good grasp of your ambient energy already. Though perhaps we will have to do a more prolonged test to make sure that it's working the way we assumed it would. Dr. Shield said before putting a hand to his chin in thought. Anything you ask, I shall do to the best of my ability, Dr. Shield. I answered unwaveringly. You will never change, will you, ISO? All the others seem much more eager to go out and help others with their own free time, and you seem to just wish to stay by my side throughout the entire time. It warms this old man's heart to hear that you wish to help me throughout my entire endeavor. He said as he touched his heart. If that is what you wish, Dr. Shield, I shall do so. I said without as much as a second thought. Though, I do not wish that on you, my child, he said as his voice began to soften as we climbed higher and higher. The air was growing colder as I could feel the soft wind chill of winter bite back into my hands and feet. You do not wish for me to stay at your side? I didn't want to hear that. I could feel some kind of rebuttal building up in my system, but it was silent as he held out hand as I let go with the energy dissipating with it. I do not. In fact, that would probably be the last thing I would want you to do. He said with a chuckle. I couldn't say a word before I could see a small light come upon him as we rose higher into the flight of stairs. Do you know why I started Project Shield, ISO? He asked me. No memory of any kind could remind me of why those words felt so familiar, but I could not recall the reason as to why he put me here. I said nothing as he simply laughed at my silence. I'll take that silence as a no. Which is fine, the serum should be working soon, so you won't remember this conversation before long or the other ones from before, and I like explaining it. He said before looking towards the coming light. I wanted to have a team, a group of people that could help those like you. The ones who are deemed worthless by society but harbor a flame like no else could. I remember finding all of you, all your brothers and sisters, as if it was just yesterday. I saw the spark of hope in every single one of you. I wanted to see where you guys could go, what you could do. I wanted to make sure that the light was protected. I wanted to make sure your and every other person in any time and space could find the joy I felt like helping you guys. I couldn't help but listen as he spoke. As if every word hung in the air, a preach and an ideal so strong I couldn't let go. When I lost everything, I thought it was over. I couldn't, or more like I didn't want to find a reason to keep going. I thought everything in this accursed world, these worlds all around were nothing but stains waiting to be washed away, but I was thinking about it all wrong. We aren't stains of red-colored paint waiting to be slathered on some canvas, we are but the artists. He held out his hand to shield himself from the light as it engrossed us both. I could feel the cold air strongly now as the light of the morning sun shined down on the both of us. I opened my eyes to see us both on the top of a mighty tower. All I could see was the endless expanse of clouds and sky before me, as the cold from being all this height up started to strike me. However, there was a grand beauty I couldn't grasp, as we both stared into the ball of heat in the sky. We both stood on platform that jutted out from the stairs, with guard rails that protected us from falling, yet all I wanted to do was jump out and fly. Dr. Shield placed his hand on my shoulder as I watched him look towards the clouds. We all look for someone, something to give our lives meaning. To find the strength to protect someone. I never had that, and right now there are many like me who can make a difference, but with no shoulder to lean on. That's you guys. I want you guys to protect those with the strength to make a difference. With the spark of hope to change their world and protect them from those who want to take. He went silent for a bit as the wind blew our hair towards the clouds. He looked at me with hope in his eyes before he asked me the question that changed everything. Do you want to protect those people too? I didn't need to think about it, there was only one answer I had. Of course I do. He chuckled lightly before patting me on the back and beginning to walk down the stairs once more. Stay here a while, ISO. I want you to take a good look at the world we must protect. I was still hung up on the idea that he wanted me to see him as I could no longer see him as he wanted me to. It was only then that I saw the clouds dissipate in front of me, leaving me shocked. It was beautiful, plains of beautiful green grass, and a city that was too far out that shined brilliantly in the morning sun. It was like staring at a painting you couldn't recreate. I held out my hand to try and reach my home. It was so far away, but I felt like I could almost grasp it. I vowed that day, that beautiful day, that I would protect everyone. That was the first thing I remember. Everything else is a blur to me. Since then, I've been trying my hardest to live up to those ideals set by Dr. Shield. You said as he looked at Nizu, as his face no longer had that smile on it. He seemed to be thinking about everything said as both of his paw-like hands were on his chin deep in thought. I came to this world after a failed attempt on protecting another person with a spark of hope. But this time, I don't know how I did this. So, there is usually a way you come from place to place then? Nizu said leaning into his chair. Normally yes, though that method has usually been given to me. When it happened I had no choice, I just went to the next place, which was here. You said, trying to give him any indication of trying to help where he could remember. So, you've come here knowing that Midoriya-san has this spark of hope that you are trying to protect? Which was never told to me what exactly that would be. Nizu said with more authority. It's like a quirk, though not everyone has them. From what I was told, the little I was, it's essentially a strong sense of hope formed into pure power. I can't tell you much more than that, though I can tell you that they can get quite strong. You said before finishing off the now cold tea. Interesting, you've said that the other ones with these sparks, they are gone, am I correct? Nizu asked with his voice getting lower. Yes. Flashes of them stayed in his mind, but he let those slide for now. So, I assume that something is doing that too. Them, unless those worlds have their high stakes as much as we do. He was right on the money. There is, but you didn't say anything after. Nizu raised an eyebrow. But I can't tell you yet, just like I can't tell Izuku or Tashinori-san. Is there a reason for this? Nizu asked impatiently. Imagine you were Tashinori-san and Izuku. Tell them that there were going to be two more dangerous villains that were going to be after them and their family. Especially Izuku, boy is barely even 15. Nizu sighed as he looked back at you. We have our own share of bad problems too. All Might may or may not have told you. You seemed to grip his fists tight. He did not. Nizu just shrugged. Then it is not my place to say, but understand that if he is Japan's #1 hero, then who put that hole in his stomach? Just something to think about. Nizu answered with some hesitation. He figured you would be smart enough to know that someone very powerful would have to make that hole in the #1 hero. Though it was not Nizu's place to be telling a boy who wasn't from his world. And I suppose that these other two creatures are just as dangerous, meaning it's hard for you to tell me about them. Nizu seemed to guess. Correct, I assume that you will still want to know about them, but until I know for sure. I am scared to give up that information. You waited for Nizu to say something to rebut what he said, but that never came. It seems that will remain the case. I shall not ask for more from you, listen. Even more so, it seems that you have been at least honest with me so far, from one experiment to another. The creature leaned back into his chair with some thought. You seemed to linger on the idea of being called an experiment. It didn't hurt his feelings. If anything, it explained a lot more of what he was feeling with the lack of memory and generally information being shoved into his brain, however. Part of him didn't truly want to believe that. He didn't say anything to Nizu about it, but he began to squeeze his fist hard enough that it began to bleed. Tell me, what am I actually? It's okay to guess if you choose, but I don't think there is a particular right answer here. Nizu seemed to ask. I don't know. You like the hybrid of a lot of animals. You have the head of a mouse, but the paws of a bear. You can also speak and make highly intelligent thoughts. I've never known an animal to such a thing, not one that was born with that anyway. You seemed to slow down as he spoke more. You would be correct in that way of thinking, at least mostly. I was one of the rare animals born with this quirk. I've known that long ago. I don't much memory of my animal years, not very many besides the painful experiments and that's blood. The creature seemed to stop just for a moment. His paws gripped onto the table. I've been given this intelligence, this ability to process who I am, and what drives me from the experiments they did. I am both thankful for it as much as I am angry and driven by that side of humanity that hurts people so much. Nizu looked as if he was trying not to remember something hurting him deeply. You said nothing as he let the creature speak as he got up out of the chair and walked over to you and stood near him. I empathize with you, is what I mean to say. You didn't know whether he was thankful for that, though that made him start to question his own merits. He let those thoughts back into the deepest part of his heart before simply saying nothing. Don't tell me you didn't think about something like this? Nizu said as he kept that same look on his face. I have. I just don't like the implications of it. I am a tool to be used, I've known for my entire life, even the bits I can only remember. But an experiment that I don't know. He admitted. I suppose without the whole story, it would be quite hard to tell. We will have to wait until maybe you start piecing yourself back together. Nizu said, circling around his desk. So, you do believe me? You asked, standing up as well. I do. You most likely have no real intent to harm Midoriya-san or Tashinori-san or using the knowledge of All Might's weakness or one for all to your advantage. However, the fact of all those murders you've had, those concern me. It can't help but has happened. I assume they were probably part of Project Shield, considering they had the armor too. But what is done, I cannot take back those lives of all the people I've hurt. He said with a small bow. Nizu was going to say something, but he saw the blood drip from his hand, and the extra mile he took to bow as he waited. That being said, I won't be doing so, as long as I can help it. He said, his voice was shaking just a bit. Nizu smiled his classic smile as he chuckled a bit. You raised his head to see the small creature rooting his desk, grabbing some kind of paper. Oh, I figured as much. All those months spent training and helping an up-and-coming hero must have done something to help you with that. Nizu marched over as he handed him the single piece of paper. You grabbed the paper and looked over it once before looking at the creature. You can't be suggesting. Oh, I am. Nizu said with a laugh before he looked back at you with a full-teeth smile. In order to watch over you, make sure you aren't doing things that would be in bad faith, and to watch over your own little apprentice, I think this will do great. There's no way. He wants me to. Before you could finish the thought, Nizu held out his paw for you to shake. How would you like to go to the best hero school in Japan? During this time, Izuku Midoriya stepped onto the large field, as the snow began to fall onto the padded ground of dirt. He breathed in slowly to the falling snow as he just looked at the falling crystals of ice. Toshinori stood next to him as he pointed to the entire field. Now, young Midoriya, this will be our testing ground for your ability to use One for All, he said with a determined shout. Izuku raised his hand in the little courage he could find within himself before he stepped onto the field. He looked around before realizing that someone else was there. It was an older lady in an almost school nurse's costume a hero might have. It's about time you two got here. I was about to freeze out here, the older lady said with her syringe-like cane in hand, as she used it to make towards the two. Young Midoriya, this is Recovery Girl. Udata's school nurse, and one of the other people that know about my smaller form and One for All, he said as he motioned his hand to show her off. Yes, it is good to meet you, Midoriya. Though I can't say the same about this old pile of bones, she shouted before whacking Toshinori over the head several times. But I get it. I'm sorry. Izuku looked dumbfounded as he watched the interaction before him. He shook in terror as they stopped as Recovery Girl seemed to look at him, analyzing him and his movements. He looks a little small, Toshi, she said very bluntly. It's good to meet you, Recovery Girl, he said with a polite bow. At least he's a polite lad. Still, I figured you would pick someone a little more brave. Toshinori spoke up quickly. He is quite brave. We just need to work on his self-confidence with himself, right, young Midoriya? He said, poking him. Izuku flinched when touched. Yeah. That was all he could muster. Yup, quite brave. Anyway, I figured that if you were going to use One for All for the first time, I should at least make sure I make an appearance. Don't want you out of commission before the exam in 2 months. She spoke. Izuku could only gulp as he held out his hand. It was only now that he felt somewhat different. It was as if his heart was beating much faster than before, not because of his nervousness, but because of excitement. He clenched that fist back as he looked at All Might. So, how should I use it? For this we are going to make sure you can even do it with what you can do now. There was chance I couldn't? Izuku said as he sweat dropped. Let's try just activating it in your arm. I want you to focus all your energy to do that, okay? Toshinori said as he stepped back a bit. Okay, how do I do that? Izuku asked with question marks going all over his head. Both adults fell over comedically and then stood back up at almost the same speed they fell as Toshinori was the first to speak. All you need to do is focus the power on your arm. Then you will clench your butt cheeks and yell, "Smosh!" he said with a powerful scream. That's terrible advice, Toshi, Recovery Girl remarked. It will have to do. Come on, young man, Toshinori said before the two walked away. Izuku walked away with that advice as he closed his eyes and made a fist with his right arm. With one large breath, he began to force his excitement, his anger, and even his hope into his arm. He didn't know what All Might meant by the clenching part, but he did that as well in case that was a thing he needed to do to activate his power. He opened to notice his power raging with a power he never felt before. His arm glowed a light orange and he could see his veins surging with red power as the quirk churned inside his system. His eyes were wide at the amount of power he could feel stored inside his right arm, as if a tornado was channeled within, waiting to be unleashed. Do it, my boy, Toshinori shouted. As if one command, Izuku looked towards the open space as he put his left foot forward and rotated his hip as he let his right arm fly back into a fist. He then used all the momentum to unleash his very first smaz. In an instant the power was released from his arm into a titanic burst of raw power. A shockwave came from his arm in a jet stream of pure air as dust was kicked up in all directions. Trees violently shook, all the snow in the area funneled towards the direction of force, making it look like he controlled it. Tashinori and Recovery Girl had to look away from all the force. When they opened them as the winds, they were surprised that in front of Izuku was a large path that was made from the force of punch, at least 200 meters out. "You did it, young Midoriya." Tashinori raised his arms in excitement. Izuku tried to wave to his mentor but felt something more painful than he had ever felt before. He held onto his right arm as he noticed how red, swollen, and broken it was. It was leaking a large amount of blood as the fingers were broken and twisted in horrible ways. He didn't scream despite the pain. Tears rolling down the side of his face made it clear that he was in pain. Both Recovery Girl and Tashinori ran over to inspect the damage. "Are you all right, young man?" Tashinori said, looking at the broken arm. "Obviously he isn't, you dolt." Recovery Girl whacked him over the side of the head. "It's be broken. I couldn't even control one punch," Izuku said as sniffles could be heard from the boy. The two didn't know from the pain or just sadness of his own statement. "We figured this would happen, young man. That is why I am here, thankfully," Recovery Girl said as she walked over to his arm. She kissed his arm as it began to glow with green energy. The bones began to heal as the red color and blood went away and the fingers fixed themselves back into place. Izuku felt the pain go away as he held up his now unbroken hand. "It's better, there's no pain," he said in surprise. "Thank goodness. I hope that you will teach him some common sense, Toshi. Though I suppose it's you, so." She said that she didn't finish her statement. Tashinori just looked like he had been cracked like a stone as he shook, and the effect was gone. "Yes, thank you, Recovery Girl." Tashinori looked over to Izuku, who seemed to be now feeling the tiredness of the nurse's quirk. He placed his hand on the successor with a smile. "You might not be able to control it right now, but that is but a hurdle you must cross. I will be here with young Lee-san. You should be proud of all the hard work you put in to get yourself this far. I can't say it was easy, nor can I say the next part will be easier, but you will learn to control one for all," Tashinori said with pride. Izuku couldn't hold back as small tears came from the corner of his eyes before he wiped them away and smiled at the hero. "Of course. I swear I will learn to control one for all," Izuku shouted with some determination in heart. "Of course you will. You will succeed with me, how I failed," he said, pointing to the sky. "You've done that quite a lot, Toshi," Recovery Girl said as if the moment was now gone. They all heard the door open onto the field as both Nizu and Yu had walked out. Yu looked at the damage caused all around him, before he simply sighed. "I assume you had the test with one for all, Izuku?" he asked, stepping up to the boy. "You though I broke my arm when I went all out. Thankfully Recovery Girl was here to help me," he said, pointing to the heroine. I assume she also has knowledge about, well, everything." "Correct. Without her, we would have some problems holding the things we do here," Nizu exclaimed. "You betcha. And don't you go forgetting that when I start asking for raises." She pointed the cane towards the creature. "I shall not," he said in quick response. "Well, looks like we are going to have to work on controlling that power of yours now. Along with some other things," Yu said before he hit Izuku gently on the head. "Good job, though." Izuku blushed fiercely at the compliment as Nizu just chuckled. "Which should be much easier now that you have a chance to go to UA with your little apprentice," Nizu exclaimed. Everyone turned their heads towards Yu slowly as he simply pulled out the piece of paper with an annoyed look. "Guess I'm going to school."